What's going on, everybody? Live to Thrive at 1:35 Eastern Time, coming at you late night local time to bring you bets and banter for UFC 290. We got Alexander the Great Volkanovski. If you've been watching this show a long time, you know we've been calling him the pound for pound number one. But the biggest threat to the throne in quite some time comes in the form of Yair Rodriguez, El Pantera. He gets his crack at the title with his dangerous kicks, his insane flying knees, his arsenal of violence, and his crazy durability, elite featherweight action to headline what is a stacked card. And we got two great guests to break it down with, two friends of the show, two guys that you know. So without further ado, let's bring them in. Our guy, Jewish Better, becoming one of the most frequent guests on the show, always ready to talk some fights. My guy is out there in these MMA and jiu-jitsu streets, putting in the work, and he's still on the show late night. Brother, welcome aboard. How are you feeling?
Much love, my dude. Appreciate you, bro. Appreciate you having me on. What a weekend, my dude. A little bit of a crazy day for me. I was supposed to actually get on a trip. My flight got canceled. Missed the next one. Just absolute insanity today. So I'm just ready to talk some fights. I'm ready to win some bets this weekend. I'm on a little bit of a losing streak, so that just lights a fire under my ass, my man. So I'm ready to go. Let's get this money.
I love it, brother. It's a game of highs and lows. We know that. And we go on runs on this show as well. On a little bit of a good run right now. Hopefully that can rub off a little bit on you. Hopefully I could get some of that fire and intensity from you as well on that comeback streak, because we never want to let our highs get us too high. And we, of course, never want to let us get our lows too low. So without further ado, let's bring on the other friend of the show that you all know, that you all love, our guy, Lucrative MMA Betting, back in the building so soon. My man answered the call. I put out the SOS. I'm on Twitter. Please, somebody answer this call. Who can come on? And we not only get a great friend of the show, but a great MMA bettor with a long-term track third-party record. Brother, welcome back to the show. How the hell are you?
Yeah, I'm doing well, brother. And you know me, I'm out here in Auckland, New Zealand. It's 6 p.m. Everybody else in the world is asleep for the most part. But Liam's always on that late night grind, man. You're always up 1, 2 a.m. The only person in America that tweets when I'm living my evening life is you. So I'm happy to respond to the back call, bro. Hopefully we make some good money this weekend. And honestly, I'm pretty confident on my bet. So yeah, I'm looking forward to talking about it.
I absolutely love it. And a common refrain on this show is that we do not go to sleep when we are tired. We go to sleep when the job is finished, and we got a lot to discuss yet. So with that being said, let's start as we always do on Bets and Banter with the very first fight of the night. We've got Kamuela Kirk moving up to 155 pounds, his new home, to take on Esteban Ribovics, who's looking to get his first win in the UFC. He is making his sophomore appearance here after being bested by Loic Radzhabov, the gentleman who was unfortunately dispatched by Muteus Ruzbeki in his last outing. So we've had a lot of turnover in this division, right? Very competitive 155-pound class. And Kamuela Kirk, to be fair, was having some mixed results at 145. His cardio seemed to be suffering, whether that's from the weight cut or just a general inability to push that pace over the course of 15 minutes. Should have a level of preparation for this fight. Should be coming in with some distinct advantages in terms of his size, his reach. I would think he's a cleaner grappler offensively in the early going of this fight. But my feeling is that Kamuela Kirk, he has unproven cardio, I would say, at this stage of the game at best, and potentially a cardio red flag here against Ribovics, who was pushing the pace intensely after a very difficult fight where he was mostly the nail against his opponent Loic Radzhabov in his last fight. So I feel like the cardio dynamic here favors the favorite here in Esteban Ribovics. I feel like he probably has the cleaner striking mechanics here, but he's at a slight size disadvantage. So how much of that is he able to leverage? A little bit yet to be seen. I feel like he'll throw more intensely in combination, but I think that there's going to be opportunities for Kirk early in the grappling. So for me, if I was to be on the side of the favorite here, I might actually wait and see if I could get a better entry after round one, because I do think that's where Kirk's going to have his best work, his best opportunity. Coming in with the guys from Fight Ready, should have a decent game plan put in place, you would think, for this fight. I think that would obviously include wrestling and grappling against an opponent who's known for getting knockouts. So with that being said, the framing of the fight, my guy Jewish Better, do you like anything as a bet on this fight?
Yeah, I actually kind of like the Kirk side. And like you said, he does slow down a little bit as the fight goes on. But I think he's going to be able to secure round one and round two with the grappling. Just from what I see from Ribovics, man, I don't like his takedown defense, and I don't like his ability to get back to his feet. And I think versus a guy like Kirk, man, you're just going to see a different level in the grappling game. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Kirk is either a brown or a black belt, but his grappling is very legitimate here, man. I think he's going to be able to outwork Ribovics in the early going and at least secure one of those 2 rounds. If he even does fade at that 7-minute mark, I just think he's going to be able to do just enough to win that round, get through that. And like you said, he's moving up a weight class. Got to be prepared for this fight, especially coming off the loss. That's going to motivate him a little bit. And that loss was to Damon Jackson here. We're talking about a guy that's been in there, a veteran of the game. You know, that was one of those moments for him. And his other losses are to guys like Bruno Souza, and in the Contender Series, he lost to Billy Quarantillo. We're not going to knock him for a Billy Quarantillo loss. So I think he's going to be able to get the job done against the much less experienced, in my opinion, Ribovics, who's really just hasn't gone up against the level of competition. Even his last fight, he lost against Loic Radzhabov, who, like you said, we just saw this guy lose to Mateus Rebecki. So is he as good as we really thought he was? Can't say so. So I think Kirk gets this fight to the ground, and he has the better jiu-jitsu all around. I got Kirk by submission here, plus 350. I'm going to be taking a shot on him, though, by money line.
And it may be a little bit of a race against time, but yeah, that is the path that I saw for Kirk as well. Unfortunately, I think it opened as high as plus 650 on the sub. It got destroyed on the offshore market. So us domestic bettors waiting for that number to open up a little bit more widely didn't get to take advantage. It's obviously been nerfed down significantly. As with the money line here, Kirk opened a much more significant underdog. A lot of money has pushed that down. So I'm talking about the fight as it lays right now, but obviously I think a lot of sharp action came in on the underdog at earlier prices. James, how do you feel about this fight? Is this a fight you're looking to take any action?
Yeah, I have took some action on the Ribovics side only because the line came down. It's funny. This game's funny, man, because obviously Kirk was -2. Kirk was plus 185. Ribovics was minus 250. And at that line, if I would have taped it at that line, maybe I would have played Kirk. I mean, plus 180 seems quite good to me, plus 185. But I didn't. I was like, nah, I don't really want to play it. You know, it is what it is. I think when I saw it was plus 160. Then it keeps coming down. I see plus 150, see plus 145, then I see plus 140. I wake up one morning, it's plus 125 Kirk. I'm like, damn. Then Ribovics is minus 145. And I'm like, you know what? Now I kind of feel like playing Ribovics. So completely market dependent, which is obviously, we all know that's how you have to play the game, right? Dependent on the market. But a lot of people who are fairly new to sports gambling may not know that. And there may be a few new viewers here. We don't always pick who we think is going to win or who we think may do better in the fight. It really depends on the market. And the market has made me play Ribovics here because I do think he is the better fighter in this spot. Maybe he's not the better mixed martial artist, but he's the better fighter. And at the end of the day, martial arts is one thing, but fighting is another thing. And some people don't like getting cracked in the face, man. It's a fist fight at the end of the day. And in my opinion, Ribovics has got that dog in him, as they say. You know, he may get taken down here. I think he will get taken down. I think Kirk can get takedowns. I just don't know whether he can top time him for 3 rounds. I don't think he will. I think he's going to tire out, and I think he's going to get finished. If Kirk is to win this fight, more than likely, I see it being a submission earlier. Because like I said, I think Ribovics is going to keep getting back up to his feet. He's going to keep forcing scrambles. He's going to keep forcing exchanges on the feet. And Ribovics hits really hard. I really do believe that. So, you know, I mean, the guy's coming into the UFC with many, many, many wins. Many inside the distant wins. And I know we can't really judge too much, but he hurt Loic on the feet in his last fight as well. So, yeah, I just think we've got like an athlete versus a fighter. That's what one of my mates called it. And I kind of agree with that. So, yeah, I took some Ribovics at minus 150. And I actually like round 2. And I don't often like round 2 specifically. Usually I lean round 1 because early knockouts happen a lot. Or round 3 because people will gas out, right? But I really like round 2 in this spot. Reason is because I think that Ribovics will have to come through some takedown offense early from Kirk. But I do see Kirk gassing out a little bit. We already mentioned the gas. And I think Ribovics is going to be the one pushing the pace late. I don't think Kirk can last to the 3rd round here. So I think it's going to become that 2nd round, you know. So I've actually played some Ribovics round 2, which is a very rare bet for me. I very rarely play round props. And if I do, I definitely don't play round 2, right? But that's what I've done this week. And the money line, like I said.
Yeah, I see your point here, James. And we've seen over a 10% move in the number, right? Over minus 230 at open, like you mentioned. Now we've seen that move from 70% implied all the way down. We're now talking about 60% implied and less at minus 145. So to your point, big move here in the implied win probability. That can, of course, change your betting opinion here. The hinge point, for example, could be minus 185, and it's already moved significantly past that. So obviously, interesting number, interesting movement here. I kind of lean towards what you're thinking is. I came in thinking Kamuela Kirk and Kamuela Kirk sub, but the more I looked into it, I felt like Ribovics is probably going to take over this fight. I felt like it was going to happen in round 3 potentially, but hey, round 2, round 3, I think that's probably the look here on the Ribovics side. Later finish. I do think that Kamuela Kirk going to look to close distance, going to look to shut it down with some grappling, probably prevent an early finish, but as he slows down, I think that opens up opportunities. So both guys have a chance to finish here. I'm curious what the fight doesn't go to decision is priced at for this fight, because I think both guys have a path to a finish here.
I think under 2.5 was minus 190, so you're probably looking at minus 210.
Yikes. Okay, yeah, that's an absolute pass. So with that being said, we can move along to the next fight here. Just want to give a shout out to the chat. Sharpest chat in the game. Always said that. A lot of kind words, a lot of support, a lot of regular faces as well. Shout out to my guy Fight Talk Only. Says, what's up, gentlemen? And our guy Big Bird says, Liam, has anyone ever said you look like Dylan Took? I do not know who that is, but I appreciate the compliment or resent the accusation if he's not a handsome individual. But either way, I appreciate it.
At least you're not Yana Lashmos.
I'm not going to say too much, but if you can get him up on the screen, I don't think you'll be too happy, bro.
For Christ's sake. All right, well, then I'm actually not going to pull it up on the screen and keep my cool and keep rocking. Shout out to my guy Pierce, though. Almost got me on tilt, brother. You're good. Next up, we got Shannon, the Turkish Delight, Ross, taking on Jesus Aguilar. And this is another fight where the market movement is almost tempting me to a play here. I feel like if Aguilar flips dog, I will probably end up taking a shot on Aguilar here. A lot of love's been coming in on Shannon Ross. And I understand it to a degree because you look at the physical intangibles here, and Jesus Aguilar's just not that big a guy. He does some negative EV things for MMA, like pulling guard into guillotines. However, I think that Shannon Ross is just susceptible to being hit, susceptible to being hurt. I don't trust his durability. He got hit with a flying butt by Clayton Rodriguez. He was already covering up before that came in. So I literally was like, are you kidding me? When I was watching that fight, it just looked unbelievable. And I don't know why he's gotten so many opportunities. I did bet Vinicius Salvador against him on the Contender Series. He was out of Hebos family. I felt like he had power on the feet as well as submission upside in that fight. And he decided to just bang it out with him on the feet and knock him over a bunch of times. So Salvador has more power than somebody like Aguilar, no doubt about it. He had finishes on the regional scene that looked, similar to those fights where he's dropping him with the big shots. However, when I look at this fight, I just feel like Shannon Ross at some point is going to get hurt because I feel like he's going to need to string this out over 15 minutes. Aguilar's a tough guy. He's pretty hard to put away. He's got a good chin. He's gone 5 rounds before and gotten the finish in round 5, so he's shown he was the fresher guy against another guy we'll talk about later, Edgar Chairez. So this is a guy who has wins outside the organization. He does have a signature move, right? That guillotine is a good finishing hold, and honestly, Taira showed it a lot of respect. Took a long time before he was able to pass the guard there. So that turned into an all grappling fight. The guy sold out for his signature move. It didn't work, and he got finished. No real, I don't really criticize that loss too much. It's just a fight that he was never going to win, really, and he lost it the way I thought he would. And we've seen evidence that Taira can defend guillotines. I don't know that that's present here for Shannon Ross. I feel like he's been submitted before. He's been audited on the mat. He's been knocked out on the feet. He doesn't look like he's a guy who's, going to make significant improvements. He's an older guy for the division. So for all those reasons, give me Jesus Aguilar here. And if the line flips, I'll probably have to get involved reluctantly because I wanted to have no exposure on this fight, but the line just keeps going one way, and I disagree with the move. So for me, that's the only thing I'm thinking about this fight. And with that being said, let's kick it to my man James. How do you feel about this fight?
Yeah, so like I said, I didn't really agree with the line movement in the first fight on Kirk. Maybe at plus 180, it could have come down a little bit, but I didn't really agree with it too much. I do agree with the line movement here. I don't think Shannon Ross, he was at plus 185 at one point, I think. I don't agree with him being plus 185 because I just don't really rate Jesse Aguilar that well. I think that may be his first name, but I don't rate him that much, right? Not to be a minus 230 over Shannon Ross. I don't really rate Shannon Ross that much, but what he does have, in my opinion, is heart, tenacity, pace, pressure, cardio, and I think he's clearly the better striker here, so only based on those things, I don't think he should ever be a plus 180. But I mean, I think this fight is fairly close to pick him, honestly. Aguilar obviously has the takedown upside, but I don't think he can just top time him for 15 minutes. And like you said, he puts himself in bad positions anyway. He's top timing people and then he gets reversed. He got reversed a few times against that Ferreira dude on the Contender Series. And he sells out for his guillotine sometimes, which obviously has done him well over the course of his career. But as you get higher up the ranks, you're not going to be able to keep pulling that off. Maybe Shannon Ross isn't high enough up the rank to where he can get a guillotine, because I don't really think Shannon Ross is anything too clever. But I would say that he has durability problems on the feet. I haven't really, Shannon Ross, I haven't really seen him make terrible decisions in the grappling. So I'm not really ready to say he's going to get gillied here, but it could happen. That front headlock series is really good for MMA in general, not even with Aguilar. I think you're always in that position in MMA, right? Because even if you're up against the fence, you're clinching, you can easily just drag them down, jump on the front headlock. So anyone who specializes in that movement, I think is really, really good for modern MMA. I think it's much better than like being a specialist in a leg lock or even a back take, because it's much harder to get those positions, right? But the front headlock is always there. So I definitely think he's got a chance to hit it in this fight. But he's a very small dude as well. You know what I mean? So he's like one of the smallest flyweights in the entire division. And if we look at Shannon Ross's last two opponents, it's not comparable to Aguilar this weekend. So I wouldn't take too much away from him getting knocked out by Alexander Rodriguez. I had the under 2.5 rounds there. I was very confident Rodriguez was going to knock him out. It was plus 110. I don't know why it was plus money. And then the Salvador fight, both of those guys hit really, really hard and are very good strikers. Shannon Ross, for the first time in his UFC banner career, is going to be the better striker. So I don't think he's going to get knocked out here. Although, Aguilar, I guess he throws hard. So I guess I say all that to say this. I do agree with the line movement. I think it should be closer to even. As a straight pick, I'll pick Shannon Ross. But, I mean, this is a big stay away fight from me.
I think a friend of the show actually got plus 285 on Shannon Ross at one point. So I think that was only at the openers, and I think that got crushed. But basically, it opened at plus money. There was some money came in, I think. And then it instantly got crushed all the way back down, and that's what we've seen since, just steady movement towards the Ross side here. So I agree with you. If we're talking about the plus 285s, even the plus 185, we're having a much different conversation. But for me, it just feels like a fight where, like you said, I feel like worst case scenario here, Aguilar's a pick'em in this fight. I feel like just for tenacity and durability alone. So those kind of things to me point to, as this line continues to move in one direction, it's going to be a choice where you've either missed your opportunity on the Ross side and you should pass entirely, or you get in on Aguilar at this new price. And so for me, as a guy who leans Aguilar, that's what I'd consider. But yeah, I'm definitely thinking that, here's our guy Pierce, as a matter of fact, says, never forget DC calling Aguilar wrestling high school takedowns. You're goddamn right. And high school wrestling has won many a fights in the UFC. Make no mistake about it. We'll talk about some more high school wrestling later on. But with that being said, we'll kick it to our guy Jewish Better. How do you feel about this fight, brother?
Dude's got the JV wrestling, man. When the value's gone, I'm gone. Just like my man Lucrative MMA said, we could have got plus 185 here. And now the money just seems to continuously creep down. Now, I understand I would have took the shot at plus 185 as well. Didn't just quite get in on it because I just can't trust Shannon Ross. This guy's got to be on the fade list somewhere. If I go back and check it, he's got to be there somewhere, because at this point, the guy's lost 3 of his last 4 fights, I believe. Albeit it's a good competition, but it was the Contender Series fight for me that kind of threw me off. The loss to Vinicius Salvador, who I didn't rate so highly. On top of that, the dude's, fighting. I think he had a clear path to victory in that fight, just to take him down, get the fight to the ground. I believe Vinicius Salvador didn't have the best takedown defense at the time. Guy just decides to bang it out with him, loses the fight, somehow gets the contract because Dana White must have liked the guy. Now he's getting a matchup versus Aguilar. And while Aguilar might not be the most technical striker, like my man Lucrative said, he does crack. So It's always possible for Shannon Ross to go out, especially at this point, coming off 2 knockout losses. I just don't know where I quite rate Shannon Ross at this point. Coming off those, the Contender Series fight was kind of weird because I have a feeling that was more so Dana White getting in those guys' ears saying, if you just have entertaining fights, even if you lose the fight, I'm just going to bring you on anyway. Kind of like wink, wink, because the first week was so boring. I think this is a good spot for Jesus Aguilar. Like my man Liam said, I just think Shannon Ross has too many holes in his game, and at this point, he's not going to be able to improve those at 33 years old. The thing I don't like about Aguilar, though, is those short arms, man. Dude has one of the shortest reaches in the UFC. If
It only makes that ghillie tighter, brother.
That's for sure. If he's able to get that flash guillotine, that's something else. And he's actually very skilled in that position. Like my man said, if he's not able to get it on Taira, big whoop. We are like you said, we already knew what happened. I believe that fight was on short notice as well. So I'm gonna lean toward the Aguilar side, but there's no bet on me for this fight. You missed the value on Ross. It's over. You're gonna have to flip and look to the Aguilar side, in my opinion here.
Yeah, and it was a credible, UFC level guy in Urseg that was the one who submitted him regionally. However, I do think that, Aguilar can create some opportunities here, and I feel like it's going to be more likely to be a club and sub than like a clean grappling transition, but that's how I feel like he would get him, and I do think that's possible here, despite the fact that he is a short king. But either way, it's a pretty low-level fight, so we can move along to the next one here, because we've got a lot of really interesting fights on this card, and the next one is between a higher-level prospect, Cameron Saaiman, taking on Terrence Mitchell. And whenever I see somebody, we say this with all love and respect. And if somebody is from Alaska and wrestled at a high level, put me on, because I don't know of them. I was saying before, we should start calling it, instead of USA Wrestling, the Contiguous 48 and Hawaii Wrestling. It's just like Alaska has not been putting out guys that I feel like are really credible on this UFC level out the gate. And especially a lot of them, except for Jared Cannonier, right? We'll give him the credit, but he did get out of the state of Alaska to get his work in, right? There's not a big population there. There's not a very developed martial arts culture. And you look at the guys that are his teammates, Terrence Mitchell, and they are, Carlton Minus. They are Patrick White. These other guys from the Alaska FC scene who fizzled out very quickly when they fought against UFC level guys. And I feel like for Mitchell, the Kai Kara-France fight is very instructive, right? He went out there, and if you listen back to the commentary on that fight from the Ultimate Fighter season, they actually say, we expected this to be a close fight, and it just wasn't, right? Terrence Mitchell looks like a guy who would be better, and then he just wasn't. And I feel like when he gets into this fight against Cameron Saaiman, the line reflects that he is not on the level. And I think that he's going to get cleaned up here and finished. So give me Cameron Saaiman probably in the first 2 rounds. What do you think about this one? Lucrative. It looks like you're unmuted, so fire away, my brother.
Yeah, man. Are you getting any feedback from me? Do you want me to mute it? Sorry.
No, sir.
All good. Yeah, so I think Saaiman's going to dominate this fight, like his odds show. He's a good fighter, Saaiman, I think he's legit, to be honest. I think he'll do decent in the UFC. I think he's going to go... we see this a lot where you either get like a late replacement and the guy's just not up to scratch, or they're trying to build a young prospect up and they throw him against someone who's just not really on the level, kind of like Shannon Ross, Cledson Rodriguez type fight. And I think this is one here. I think Saaiman's going to knock him out. I think Saaiman inside the distance, Saaiman knockout prop, Saaiman round 1-2. I think they're all good, honestly. This is a setup spot for him. The only thing I'll say about Mitchell is that he gives it a good first round, I guess, but the dude hasn't even gone late that much, and we don't know what to expect from him. Saaiman pushes an insane pace against the best guys, against good guys, good UFC level guys. Mitchell is probably like a choke or bust. He wraps up his chokes fast and well, but other than that, he's out of his depth here. So I think Saaiman's going to knock him out.
I agree with you. And I also think that Saaiman has some chance to club and sub him here as well. So I would preference those round props in the ITD. But to your point, I feel like the KO is much more likely here. But I do just have that vision in my mind of him clubbing him down and maybe having to go for a couple follow-up shots. Mitchell's got long limbs, a longer neck. Those kind of things, when you're wobbled especially, open up really easy submission opportunities. And we've seen his teammate and mentor Dricuss also be pretty submission savvy when he's looking for the neck. So something to watch for there. What do you think about this one, JB? You got anything?
Yeah, he attacks the back really well too, man. I could see that for sure. But just Terrence Mitchell, man, just this guy's record alone, just looking at his tapology, I don't even have to watch a fight. And 3 years off, what was going on there? Like, I need to know. And then comes back and takes 3 fights versus, again, lowest level of competition. I just don't feel like I'm getting any type of fighter with Mitchell here. This is clearly a setup spot, just like my man Lucrative said. Assignment inside the distance here. They're going to build the young prospect. That's it.
Short, sweet, and to the point. I think that's perfect. This is one of the more straightforward fights on the card. You got a clear prospect, a clear development guy against a guy who hasn't taken many steps up, who hasn't been very active, who hasn't had much experience in this weight class, and he's taking on a guy who's clearly on some sauce, in my humble opinion. So, with all that being said, I like the Saaiman side, and I think he's getting it done ITD. Next up, guys. And also, the one thing I'll say is he's fouled in every fight. And so I know a lot of people are going to look for that yam bag shot like my guy, Uncle Lou. But I will tell you this. I'm worried that he will finish him before he gets a chance to foul him. So that's one thing you got to be wary of in this spot is Saaiman getting the finish before the foul. But next up, speaking of prospects, Vitor Petrino. This is a guy I tried to fade in his first UFC fight with Anton Turkalj via submission. It was plus 750. Felt like that was a spot where, Turkalj was going to have some opportunities. He had grappled with the likes of Gustafsson. He had been out there getting a lot of experience, and I felt like he was going to bring that takedown heavy approach like he had brought in the fight prior. But I did not account for how much the physicality edge would play out in favor of Petrino, and he looks like a freak athlete. I expected him to be a guy who was KO or bust, and he went out there and out-wrestled this guy to a decision that I thought was going to submit him. So okay, I got to reevaluate a little bit. I feel like his physical assets are huge. I feel like Marcin Prachnio, with all due respect, is more of an enhancement talent. When you have a fighter, I know he was going through some stuff outside the octagon. We're not trying to pile on him or anything, but when we're talking about William Knight going out there and not attempting strikes, not trying to fight back, and you don't finish him, that's an indictment, in my opinion, of your offense. And when we're looking at a guy like Petrino, I feel like if you're not fighting back, he's going to put a hole in your head. He's just a guy with freakish natural gifts, and I think that he could put that to work here against Marcin. So I understand why people are betting on Marcin, right? It's a big number in a weight class that invites volatility with a guy who's otherwise pretty unproven. He hasn't fought many high-level fighters. His win on Contender Series was a rematch of a fight he had already won earlier in his career, right? But that also tells me the UFC wants to put this guy in a position to succeed. Get into the organization with a win you've already gotten, and then when you get that, we'll give you another winnable fight against Turkalj, who that was kind of, let's see what we have, or either one of these guys' prospects. I felt like Petrino distinguished himself, and now he gets a guy who's got a good record on paper, but ultimately isn't that great of a fighter, in my humble opinion. So I think this is going to be a Petrino win, and I think it could be a Petrino finish. So with that being said, I'm going to kick it to my guy, Lucrative. What do you got here, brother?
Yeah, I agree with you, man. I like Petrino. I think he's a decent fighter. I know he doesn't possess like great individual mixed martial arts skills. He's not super technical, but like you said, raw physicality, extreme power. He will engage with the wrestling a lot as well, and seems to have very good cardio. I thought that he might gas out a little bit. So I actually bet on him in his last fight against Anton. And then I also bet the under 2.5 or the fight doesn't go to decision. And they were both similar numbers. I think I bet on him at like minus 110 and I bet on the doesn't go at minus 125, right? And what I thought was I thought he was going to cash both because I thought he was going to get an early knockout. But I thought if he doesn't get an early knockout, he's most certainly going to gas under the grappling pressure and get submitted. So I kind of thought we could double dip, or at least it's a hedge. I didn't expect him to win a decision. I must say, I wasn't fully ruling it out, but I didn't expect it. So he impressed me there as well. Even though I bet on him, he still impressed me even more. And in this fight, I think it's a bad matchup for Prachnio, man. Prachnio is like the guy's done against these athletic beasts like Petrino, man. I mean, yeah, maybe he makes Petrino miss and just stays on the outside and kicks, but is he really going to do that? I mean, Petrino ain't William Knight, man. Petrino's going to throw a lot of strikes. Petrino throws heavy as well, and it only takes one. I could see Prachnio winning for a couple of minutes with his kicks, his long-range kicks, and everyone thinks they have value on Prachnio, and then he gets hit once and he just dies. You know, we have to remember that he got knocked out 3 times in a row in round 1 by Sam Alvey and a couple of other dudes. I can't even remember now. I watched them the other day. I know he hasn't been knocked out in a while, but I think he gets knocked out again, man. What more can I say? The physicality is too much. Petrino is a beast, and his power's just, and his speed, man. He's faster than Prachnio in the boxing range. Way faster in the boxing. Prachnio has decently fast kicks, but when they collide, like I said at the start, man, this is a fist fight, man. Like, I don't care if Prachnio's the better technical striker. Petrino's going to land a punch on his face, and he's going to go down, in my opinion. So I like Petrino, and I honestly don't think Petrino KO at -130 is that bad.
Yeah, and to your point, James, I feel like he could potentially like pick him up and throw him outside the octagon like it's the Royal Rumble if he wanted to, right? Like athleticism certainly matters when we're talking about a fist fight, because think about what that guy Valentin that is coming up against Bo Nickal. Think about his fights that he had. There was not one bit of technique to his double leg, but he's the stronger guy in every fight that he had. So he picked the guy up and turned him sideways. What are you going to do about that? It's just that's the kind of thing that people don't take into account, physical intangibles. And I do feel like in this fight, physical intangibles are all one direction. It's Vitor Petrino, bigly. And to be honest with you, James, the only danger I feel like with that KO prop is that if he takes this guy to the ground, I feel like he could do whatever he wants to him. I feel like he could wrap up an arm, a choke. I think Petrino's probably not going to do that. He'd probably be more apt to just grab a wrist and punch a hole in his head. But straight up, like, I think if he takes Prachnio to the ground, he's going to do whatever he wants to him. So that's just a personal opinion. What do you think about this one? Do you think we're out to lunch with our enthusiasm for the young Brazilian prospect, or do you think Marcin Prachnio is a live underdog here?
Nah, I try to find a way to play Prachnio. You know me, my man. You know I'm always looking for that edge on an underdog, especially when, we got a guy in Petrino, though, here. Like my man Lucrative said, this is just a thing of matchups. A guy who hits hard versus a guy who's chinny. We've seen that time and time again. We couldn't see it come out in the last fight because William Knight just didn't throw. He just didn't throw, my man, and that just shows how low volume my dude Marcin Prachnio is. At the end of the day, I think this is a good spot for a finish-only prop. -350 on Vitor Petrino. Finish only. I think he does get the finish, but the only way I really see Prachnio winning this fight at the end of the day is some type of bullshit decision. He outpoints him, karate fights him versus an unproven fight. I just don't even think even if Petrino somehow death gasses, I don't even see Marcin Prachnio being able to get the finish against him because we just saw him not be able to get it against William Knight. So this is just one-way traffic, in my opinion, for Petrino, the undefeated fighter. I think you may have to pay a little bit of. I think this could be lined a little bit closer. I would understand a stab on the Prachnio side, but I'm just not getting there myself, man. I'm gonna go with you guys here and back Petrino, but I'm gonna go with the finish only at -350.
I don't hate that at all, my brother. I think that Petrino is, I'm not a big chalk guy, right? And my instinctual, stance is like, let's look for a live dog, let's find the live dog. I looked at this fight and I was like, Petrino's going to kill this guy. So I feel like he's going to roll here as chalk early in the night. Speaking of chalk, I think is going to roll. Tatsuro Taira is up next, and he's one of my favorite fighters to watch in the UFC. Fun guy, excellent grappling, young guy. You guys have heard me talk about him a million times, so I'm going to kick this right over to my guest. Let's start with Jewish Better on this one. Another jiu-jitsu head. I think that Tatsuro Taira is the side here. I think he's the better fighter, but I'm curious to see what you think.
I do think he's the better fighter. I think he has the better jiu-jitsu. I think, Taira is that. What he's most popularly known for is his last fight where he, unfortunately, was more the ref's fault than anything that fight got attention. So he lost to Clayton Carpenter on Contender Series, and I'm not even really sold on Clayton Carpenter yet as an MMA fighter. He's still young, I think Taira's the better prospect. I think they're trying to get that Japanese market, and I think that's their guy for that market as well. I think he's one of the best Japanese fighters, if not the best Japanese fighter in the UFC right now. So that just goes to show you that on a big UFC pay-per-view card, I think they want this guy to win. They're bringing back Chairez to go up against him. I believe, is Chairez on short notice?
Yes, he is. Guys? Yes, he is.
Okay.
Because I believe Taira was supposed to fight Clayton Rodriguez 2 weeks ago.
Right. Yes, exactly. So coming in on short notice, we know short notice guys don't tend to do too well, especially when they're that big of an underdog. But I do think this is a little widely priced. Chairez does have some striking, and Taira hasn't fought in like the craziest level of competition yet. So I don't think anything's out of realm. We did call Elvis Brenner last week at plus 500, so we've seen this stuff happen time and time again. This still at the end of the day is punching and kicking. So Taira is a little bit tough to bet here because he could technically outpoint him by controlling him for 3 rounds on the ground, but I do think he gets the submission. But I'm going to stay away from this fight completely. My gut instinct tells me just to stay away from this one. But yeah, Taira all the way here, man. I agree with you.
Yeah, I think that for Taira, the things that go unremarked upon sometimes is the finishes that he had regionally on the way up. He knocked most guys down with a left hand and then finished with a rear naked choke, lightning fast transitions. And that's what told me he had great finishing instincts. You've seen it in the UFC as well, just textbook finishes of that arm triangle. We talk about all the time in my gym. You put somebody in a problem, they're going to try and figure out a way to solve it, especially a really tough guy. But you put them in a dilemma, there is no solution. They're just trying to figure out which problem they want to deal with until it's all over. And that's exactly what happened to Jesus Aguilar in his last fight, right? He did a good job defending one way, the other, and then he's like, oh God, I'm out of options. He's about to break my arm. And if I try and do anything else, I'm going to go unconscious. So I just felt like, Taira has clinical grappling, but he also has big hands for the division, like physically large hands. And I think he connects with a lot of power. I think he's got a fast left hand. I think he's got underrated kicks as well. So I think he's got some good strikes to offer on the feet, but certainly Chairez a little bit more experience on the feet because so much of his time has been spent in grappling situations in the UFC.
And we got the same haircut, man, so I gotta go with him.
Absolutely, brother. I love to hear it. James, what do you think about this fight? Chairez, I will say to his credit, very tough guy. He is a guy that's gone into that 5th round before against, what's his name? Aguilar, like we just mentioned. So great point. And kicking it over to you with that being said, how do you feel about this fight?
I do think Taira's a little bit wide. I don't think he should be minus 1,000 here. They are pricing him like he's the champion of the division. So I don't think he should be this wide. I would line him about minus 500 range, probably somewhere around there. So there probably is some value on Chairez, but it's still not a lot of, they're not giving you a lot of space, Minus 500 is still minus 500, still means they're going to win 85% of the time, you know what I mean? So it's like, for me, it's like, yeah, and there might be 5% value or something, but I'm not really rushing to back it, especially because I don't know that much about Chairez's defensive grappling. I will say that he looked okay in terms of defending some submission attempt, or he didn't allow Clayton Carpenter to get into that dominant grappling positions on him, although he was getting taken down a lot, but he got taken down. He lost the fight via grappling, but Clayton Carpenter is good at submissions, man. He's really good, and he's good at passing the guard, and he's good at getting to your back, and he wasn't able to do any of that on Chairez. So I just don't know. I don't know, right? But then if you go and look at his record, I didn't actually see this fight, but I'm pretty sure Chairez got subbed by an 0-0 guy about 4 years ago. So a guy making his debut subbed him, which is not a good look in professional MMA, right? Maybe the guy's the next superstar, but I doubt it. He was making his MMA debut, and he got subbed via triangle armbar, I think. And we know Taira loves his triangles. We know he loves his armbars, and we know he loves his triangle armbars. So if he's getting subbed by that position by an 0-0 guy, Taira can probably sub him. I think Taira is a legit prospect. He's definitely really something to look forward to in the future. He's only 23 years old, so he's going to be improving every time out. He is a little bit sloppy, though, in his grappling exchanges, and I know you guys would have seen this as well. Oftentimes, he'll fall off the back. Oftentimes, he'll rush positions. So I do think he needs to shore up some of his jiu-jitsu, which is actually his strong suit, which is funny because it's weird because his jiu-jitsu is so good, but I've seen him get reversed like 4 or 5 times in the same fight. I mean, Candelario reversed him like 3 times. I've seen him have the back in full and just fall off the front. And he looks a little bit sloppy. But then on the other hand, I've seen him do some insane transitions where he looks so slick. So it's a little bit weird. I guess he's just 23.
Yeah,
and
he's young.
He's young and he's a little bit inexperienced. But you see the potential there. And not only the potential, but like he's realizing it at the moment. So I think the way you tackle this fight is you look at the over and unders. Because for me, I do think the sub comes, but I do think it comes a little bit later. But this fight is volatile in that because, like we said, Taira does make mistakes. He might get reversed here by Chairez, but he is so slick in the transitions, he might just lock up a triangle during a reversal. You know what I mean? Like Taira might get reversed and he might lock up a triangle straight away from guard. So I think it's volatile, man. But for me, I lean over 1.5. I do think he gets the submission. It probably comes late. I will say, though, that Taira decision is plus 500. And I know for a fact that Chairez is not going to go out easy, right? Maybe he just gets caught because he's just not on the same level as Taira in the jiu-jitsu department. But Taira decision at plus 500 is pretty good. I don't understand why his inside the distance is like minus 300. I don't think he's going to just submit everyone he fights. I really don't. You know, he's gone to decision against Carlos Candelario already. And I do think we're going to see Taira getting a few decisions in the near future. And I think when he does get a decision, his decision line will be like plus 500, plus 600. It's just, are we going to miss out on it, right? I don't think this is the spot. I do think he gets the sub, but I think it comes later. But for me, it's just a pass fight, man. They're not giving you much to work with at minus 1,000 or even the props.
You know, James, it's so funny because there's been one angle that I've been donating on every Taira fight, which is Taira by knockout. And it's normally like 8-1 and higher. And I've been donating on it because I believe in his ground and pound, right? And number one, I think that he has the power on the feet. I mentioned that. But I think that his ground and pound is sick. And you think back to that Carlos Candelario fight. It was his UFC debut. And how often do we talk about people shitting the bed in a UFC debut and just fumbling for us? And what Taira did was he started slow, right? Candelario went to a guillotine threat. Taira like literally flat backed himself, had to recover. And I was thinking to myself, this is the test of whether or not this kid is a real fighter because he's facing some early adversity. Candelario's a black belt, right? So he's not the world's best black belt, but he's not a punk either. And he's gone out there and defended a lot of really tough positions from guys before. So I felt like, you know, this was a fight where, you know, Taira was going to have to prove his mettle. And he goes out there. I bet big on his money line in that spot, but on the props, it was small. And I felt like he did his job, right? Recovered in round 2, ended up getting to a great position, getting a dominant round. And in round 3, I thought it was eligible for a 10-8. He was unloading with big elbows. Candelario was in a lot of bad spots, forced to constantly defend from submissions as well. And so I felt like he just turned on a little bit too late in that fight. Whereas you've seen, he's been turning on faster and faster in these fights, coming out with a little bit more aggression. And in the last fight, as soon as he passed the guard, it was right into his submission series. I do think he's levels ahead on the ground, but I also believe he has options in this fight. I think if he wants to, he could get on top and try and ground and pound this guy and do a lot of damage. Chairez is not going to quit, to your point, James. You're going to have to finish him. Like, you're either going to have to beat him into a bloody pulp and force the referee to pull you off, or you're going to have to submit him. And I think Taira has both opportunities. So that's why I think the ITD will cash. But to your point, the under 1.5 feels like it could be a trap to me because I think this could be round 1, round 2, or round 3. You know, I feel like Taira is not a guy who rushes. He takes his time, he's patient, and normally we're seeing this guy get submitted later on in these fights. For example, it was round 5 against Aguilar. But then you look back at Aguilar and Taira, you don't want to do MMA math and just think it's an easy projection, but I think you look at the grappling in those fights and you say, wow, the better grappler is Taira by a significant degree, and this guy submitted you, that's a problem. So for me, I think it's Taira. It's probably by sub, but if they need me to make a goddamn donation again, I just may do it. So shout out to you guys in the chat. We've got a lot of fine people still rocking with us, 60 people watching live. So thank you to each and every one of you guys. Without further ado, let's get into this next fight on the preliminary card. We got a rematch. Jimmy Crute coming in with a 12-3-1 record because he went to a draw with this man, Alonzo Menefield, last time out. And James, we got another guy from your neck of the woods where you're at. And, you know, this is a guy who has been putting in a lot of work. He's the much younger fighter, 27 years of age, trying to bounce back since that Jamal Hill face breaker, 4 punches into the fight, right? Not how you want anything to go. But that was a fight where I felt like Jamal Hill was being undervalued, right? He comes in as a dog there. That was, you know, crazy overcorrection after he lost to Paul Craig. but we saw exactly how he delivered in that spot. Vicious power. We've seen him do the same thing to Johnny Walker, other guys in the division. He's got lethal hands. He comes out and throws, and he's not afraid to get into a fight. So Jamal Hill, really terrible matchup for him, but now got back on the the proverbial horse by getting some takedowns, saving himself from another finish loss. And he salvaged what he could from that fight, right? By the end of it, his opponent's so tired he needs the cage to hold himself up. And we've seen that before from our guy Alonzo Menefield, where he starts a fight strong, he looks okay, but then think about the William Knight fight, where William Knight, I bring this up every time, so I apologize if you guys have heard this before, but it dead serious, changed my opinion of him forever. Dude, William Knight didn't land one strike, but he still got the win in that fight because he threw punches and attempted them in round 3. And Alonzo Menefield didn't do a goddamn thing. So I was just like in awe watching that performance. I feel like Alonzo slows down over the course of his fights. I feel like Crute is going to be very aware of the fact that he could get knocked out here. And he is going to come with wrestling shoes and headgear. And he's going to try and hug this guy, take his nuts, whatever he's got to do. He's going to just be parked on his hips and try and take him down all fight. And I think that that's probably what's going to happen here. So give me Jimmy Crute reluctantly. I think he's going to get the win, but not bullish on it. Don't have any bets in this fight. James, how do you feel about this one? We got a local guy for you. Any love for your local guy, or you think Alonzo's going to detonate him again?
Yeah, so Jimmy's over there in Australia. I'm over here in New Zealand, and New Zealand and Australia are like brothers. So he's definitely in my neck of the woods where I live now. And I actually bet on him last time out against Alonzo Menefield, and I felt like a square. I laid chalk. It was like minus 160, and he almost gets finished about 9 times. But a lot of what I thought in that fight, my opinion hasn't changed, right? I guess my main thing that's changed from laying minus 160 chalk and staying off the money line here now is just that Jimmy Crute's fight IQ, I can't trust it. I didn't think we'd see Jimmy Crute keep his head on the center line for 15 minutes in the last fight, especially not after getting almost knocked out brutally multiple times. But I also think that maybe he was just badly concussed from that first blow in the end of the first round, and he didn't really have the wherewithal to, man. Like, fighting's a crazy game, bro. If you take a big headshot in round 1, you might not be there for the rest of the fight, and I think people don't really realize that unless you've been concussed yourself, But
Yeah.
you get concussed and you're fucked for months, 2 months after. You know what I mean? People go weird after they're concussed. It's a real thing. So especially 1 second after you're concussed in the fight, you can make weird decisions. So I'm going to give Jimmy Crute a little bit of a off, just because I do think he wasn't himself, after he got knocked down. And so in this fight, I think he's going to be a little bit smarter. I can't guarantee that, so I'm not going to play his money line. If I could know that for certain, I would play his money line here, because I think he should be a favorite. I think minus 160 is about where it should be. You know what I mean? Maybe it was a square bet I made last time, but I do think evens is. I don't think he should be evens, but yeah, I just can't get around to it, man. But I do think that he can, like you said, latch onto the hips a little bit faster this time. Not even faster, because he did it fast in the last fight, but a little bit more. I think he can be a little bit smarter. Instead of just trying to drag him down with singles and doubles and using all of his energy, he's on 2 knees trying to turn the corner and stuff like this. Alonzo's a massive, powerful guy, man. Maybe he just needs to get in the clinch, use some sweeps, tie trips, which Jimmy's very good at. These sort of things to catch Alonzo off balance, rather than traditional singles and doubles. That might be a better way to take Alonzo down. And also, when he's on top, don't try and rush the finish. Don't try and pound him out for 100%. Maybe just ride him out, grind him out, stay on top of him for a little bit longer. Alonzo's a massive ball of muscle. This guy doesn't really have a good gas tank. We saw in the last fight that Jimmy Crute, after being demolished on the feet multiple times, he was still pushing in that 3rd round. He still got him down in that 3rd round. He was still pushing for a finish. This tells me that Jimmy Crute is going to be the one there late in the fight. I think Jimmy Crute has better cardio. I think he has more tools to win the fight, and I think he can win the fight in multiple ways. I think Alonzo's basically knockout or bust here. I think Jimmy can sub him. I think Jimmy can ground and pound him, and I think Jimmy can win a decision. So I'm going to say that Jimmy wins the fight, but considering Jimmy has bad head movement, and I can't trust his fight IQ, and Alonzo is hard to grapple, at least early, I'm going to pass completely. But I was on a panel yesterday with Couch Warrior. Shout out to him and Pat and all them boys there. And they mentioned Jimmy Crute decision at plus 600. And I honestly don't mind that. Even the fight goes to decision is like plus 300. I understand it's a bit crazy because of the last fight we just watched, right? Like betting a goes to decision after that last fight, you got to think you're crazy. But you can afford to get a bit crazy if they're giving you plus 300, plus 500 for the decision, right? And I do think that Jimmy, if he does play it smarter, like I assume he will do if he wants to win the fight, it could go a little bit later into the fight. So, yeah, I'm going to say Jimmy Crute wins via decision, actually. And if that's my outright pick, that decision prop at plus 500 is looking a bit juicy to me. So I haven't played it yet. Maybe I will do. Hopefully those in the chat don't nuke it for me, because if not, I'll have to play it right now. But yeah, man, I'm gonna pick Jimmy to win the fight.
I like it, man. I agree with you. I think Jimmy's going to win this fight. I do think that the early line, I believe it opened around a minus 105. I think that was an overcorrection, where, again, this is a guy who was heavily favored in the first iteration, and sometimes recency bias is the most powerful force in this market. So I'm going to kick it over to my guy, Jewish Better, see if you agree or disagree, whether you like the American here, but then afterwards, we'll circle around to the great comments from the chat. So if you guys have anything to add, go ahead and fire away as we hear from our guy, Jewish Better. What do you got, brother?
Yeah, dude, I can't forget that fight versus it was one of my first UFC events. That fight versus Ed Herman and Alonzo Menefield. I mean, a just decrepit old Ed Herman. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Ed Herman took him down in that fight. If my memory serves me correctly. Correct me if I'm wrong. It might have been the other way around, but still, just an overall weird fight. And just like you said, he has a little bit of those gas tank issues. I think the thing with the William Knight fight was, if I'm not mistaken, the fight before that was the fight versus OSP, where he gassed and then gassed so bad he got finished, right? Chasing that finish in the first round, if I'm not mistaken. So, yeah, guy definitely has gas tank issues. Definitely suspect fighter in general. 35 years old. We got the younger fighter in Crute. Guy has a grappling advantage as well. Can get the fight to the ground. That submission versus Paul Craig, big feather in his cap. I think he's maybe the only person to ever submit Paul Craig and got that done. And we've seen guys come back after getting knocked out against guys like Jamal Hill. Look at Johnny Walker, guy who people call Chinny, still able to get wins at the top 10 level of the UFC. This is a little bit of I think of a matchup where Jimmy Crute just got to get the grappling going. If he doesn't get rocked, just like my man Lucrative said, that even a flash, man, could change the whole outcome of a round. So a lot of randomness, especially at the 205 weight class. Jimmy Crute decision only, though, minus 125. If he gets chinned, yeah, that's always possible. I think he has a major grappling advantage here. And I think I'm going to take a shot on that. And actually just kind of looked at that because my man Lucrative saying the decision prop was there. I just don't see a way that Alonzo Menefield beats him over 3 rounds. He's not that type of fighter. He's more of a boomer bust type of guy. And you got to take advantage of these lines, especially on DraftKings, man. These same game parlays, these finish only props. You might wind up taking a push in the end, but you took a push in the last fight, betting the money line anyway. So, just remember, if you have access to those books, those lines are there. And that's something I'm going to be taking a shot on, I think, at the end of the day. We got a major grappling advantage here. And our only real worry, in my opinion, is if he gets chin. Sure, Crute could get the submission, but then you just get a push anyway, and your read was correct at the end of the day. So that's my lean here. Also, one thing I want to mention before this goes, I've seen a lot of pick'ems that open that are at pick'ems, and then the line slightly starts to shift to about minus 125, and then by fight time, it's probably going to hit minus 140. I've seen a lot of those lines win. I believe the most recent one, I'm going to go back and check, so maybe go on to the next fight, but I'll remember it. My memory is a little off right now. It was a recent fight. I believe it was a woman's fight, so I'm going to go back and look. But a lot of these lines lately, at pick'em prices, changing to the minus 125, then they get up to about minus 140. So that's a trend that I've seen a lot of the time. The favorite wins in that spot. So
Hell yeah, brother. Well, I appreciate it. If you do pull that up, let me know. But I want to read off a couple of really good comments from the chat, start a few of these constant commenters. I always say sharpest chat in the game. Appreciate each and every one of you guys. But Stimmy OG says, yo, Liam, I can't be wrong, but I'm getting Grant Dawson vibes with Stimmy Crute. Let me know if I'm tripping. I actually agree with you. You know, a younger guy going against a guy who people perceive as maybe a couple steps ahead and this kind of thing, but age comes at you quick, right? And we've seen Ismagulov go from being a top-end performer in the division to a guy who was made to look very average by Grant Dawson, where other guys have put up higher levels of resistance. Part of that is Grant Dawson making these significant improvements at American Top Team, but also part of that is the fact that age catches up with everybody in this game. And I think that for Alonzo Menefield at 35, some of the athletic dynamism that has carried him to this point is probably starting to regress just a little bit. On top of that, training with Pat Barry, what exactly do we expect out of that relationship? Who knows, to be frank. I think that when I look at Alonzo Menefield, I don't expect he's going to make massive improvements. OSP, the last time he looked great in the UFC was when he knocked this guy's head off. I don't think his chin is perfect either. I think that's why he was very tentative against William Knight, because William Knight just throws bungalows, right? And I feel like this is a guy who Jimmy Crute could potentially hurt, and I feel like he could potentially submit on the ground. Shout out to our guy Nigel Lee, made a similar point to you, James, when he said Crute had great moments in the first and got in trouble with a bad submission attempt. I agree. I think Liam is right. Wrestling shoes should be an effective fight. I agree with that completely. I think he's going to come out wrestling early and often, and I think he might be smart enough here to go for control, to try and gas this guy out and look for the finish later on in rounds 2 and in rounds 3 when this guy tires out invariably, as he always does. And I think that in the early going, it's about self-preservation and limiting exchanges. So shout out to our guy, Capping Service. Hugely appreciated, brother. Drops a $20 dono. Appreciate the content. Appreciate you, brother. Not a parlay guy. To my guy Kai Quackenbush, asked for the parlay lock. I'm more of an underdog hunter than a parlay lock guy, but I appreciate you being here, and hopefully we'll find a couple things for you. Petrino right now is one of the chalk pieces that I do feel good about, but I know you're liking Prachnio, Kai, so best of luck either way, my brother. Pierce says, who told Alonzo it was a good idea to move from Coach Saif to Barry? Nobody that I'm aware of, but either way, thank you to the sharpest chat in the game. Appreciate you guys for rocking with us. That being said, next up, Yazmin Jauregui at 115 pounds, taking on Denise Gomes, only women's fight on the card. And it's a good one, boys. Yazmin Jauregui, she comes in against Yasmin Lucindo. It'll forever be confusing to the tongue as a result. But either way, Jauregui is a very talented Mexican prospect. She looks like she is on every supplement known to mankind. She comes in with six-pack abs, big arms. She comes in with a lot of power. And does she look like the cleanest fighter ever to start round 1? No. But I think she's durable. I think she's tough. Yaz Jitsu is her name on Instagram. She's a girl who's been getting a lot of time on the mats. I believe she's a purple belt, taking on a brown belt in Denise Gomes here. But I think both ladies are about parity on the mat. I do think, though, that Denise Gomes, her wrestling is not very good, and Bruna Brazil, a tall, awkward, long girl, made her look a little bit better than she maybe is. I do think she's good and has a lot of potential to grow. She's still very young. Both these women are. But I think that right now, Yazmin Jauregui is more developed. I think she's more physically developed as well, and I think she's got some intangible advantages here. So give me Yazmin Jauregui. I think she gets it done inside the distance. Speaking of props I've donated on multiple times in a row, Yazmin Jauregui by sub twice to the well, hasn't cashed for me yet. Do I make it 3 in a row here at plus 1,500? I do consider it, because I think the club and sub is a viable option here. We've seen, what's her name, Loma Luke Boonmi, put in a couple camps at Bang Down Muay Thai and come out and take this girl down and take her down consistently. So for me, that's another problem here against a girl who I think in Jauregui has just physical intangibles to get takedowns if she wants them. So very, dangerous fight. Obviously, I'm not laying the minus 400. Shout out to our guy Pasha, says minus 400 on a female fighter, not worth the parlay risk. I tend to agree with you as a theoretical perspective, but I also got to give you guys a pick. I got to tell you guys how I feel, and I feel like Yazmin is going to win this fight and do it probably dominantly in round 2 or 3 after a tough first round. We'll kick it over to my guy, James. James, how do you feel about this fight? Do you have a strong read one way or the other here, brother?
Yeah, I think Yasmin's clearly the better prospect. She's undefeated. She's a very good fighter, to be honest. She's only 24 years old, I think. And it's surprising to see Gomes is actually younger than her. So when I think of Jauregui, I think of this young prospect. And Gomes is actually a bit younger than her. And I cashed on Gomes in her last fight. She was like plus 205 or something. And, I mean, she looked minus 400. It was an insane line. I'm not going to be going back to the well here. I do get a better line on her this time, plus 300, but I'm not going to be backing her. I think Gomes is a good fighter. I played her against Loma Lookboonmee at a massive underdog odds. She lost. And then I played her against, Bruna Brazil at massive underdog odds. Unfortunately, I'm jumping off here because I think Jauregui, she just levels above. Her footwork's much better. Her understanding of range is much better. Her distance control is much better. I think she has the takedown and wrestling and top time upside. And so for that reason, I'm not going to be betting anything. But I don't know if she finishes her. Gomes looks really tough. I know she got finished in her debut or something like that against, I know that chick. I can't remember her name, but she's been about, I don't think she was ever in the UFC, but she's been about the regional scene for sure. But other than that, she hasn't been finished in a while. And yeah, I don't know, man. Gomes is like, she's a good fighter. So I don't really want to bet on her losing inside the distance. But Jauregui hits hard. She hits clean. One thing I will say for anyone who wants to bet Gomes is like, I wouldn't be surprised if Gomes dropped Jauregui or something in round one. I honestly wouldn't, because she's been hurt by Lucindo. She got wobbled a little bit. She also got hurt by Estela Nunes. And, she could get hurt by Gomes, because I think Gomes actually hits harder than probably both of them, yeah? But other than that, I think Jauregui is going to win. I'm going to take her to win by decision. I think it's going to be a fight where maybe Gomes looks like value, but actually Yazmin was about 80% or so, right? But it might look a little bit closer. But if you actually break it down, she probably would win 8 out of 10 times or something like that. Oftentimes we get those fights. I call it the illusion of value. It's very, very common in the UFC, right? Where we see fights, they look kind of close, but in fact, there was no value. It just looked like certain moments in the fight had the illusion of value. I can kind of see that happening here. Yeah, but my pick is Jauregui via decision.
Yeah, and to your point, James, we've seen at this UFC level her take on a bunch of strikers that come out hot in the early going and then taper off a little bit as the fight goes on. So she's had to battle some adversity and then get the wins a little bit later. When you think of Estela Nunes, you think of her gassing out pretty significantly. And in that fight, plus 200 ITD for Jauregui was a very nice spot. I love that considerably. Thinking about the Lucindo fight, the reason I bet her there at minus 300 was because I felt like Lucindo will be a great prospect, but she wasn't there yet. I felt like it was just a little bit too much too soon. That's what I feel like here, but the number is a little bit more steep. And to your point, Perrone Vale Tudo, great team. So Denise Gomes just offers a little bit more, and it's the same chalk price. So for me, if this continues to come down, a lot of love has come in on the Gomes side. God bless. Best of luck. I understand people taking a big dog shot in WMMA, but I have been on the Jauregui train. I was on it in the first fight. I was on it in the second fight. I'm not getting off it in this fight because I believe she's the better fighter. So for me, it's just a question of how much does this line come down? What prices am I able to get? And if they're enticing, I'll get on the Jauregui side. If not, I'll end up letting this one pass me by. But for me, definitely a lean towards the Mexican fighter here. I think Yazmin Jauregui gets the job done. Shout out to the 72 people rocking with us live. We've got Jack Della Maddalena up next, a fan favorite.
Yo, my
very
dude.
no name. Oh, my guy, brother. Please go ahead. Drop the hammer. When I start going bottom to top, I always forget. Brother,
Nah,
please
you're
drop
good,
your
bro.
heat.
You're good. You're good. Nah, early in the week though, I really I'm still sitting on this play, so I actually kind of want to get your guys' opinion on this. Over 2.5 in a women's strawweight fight, sitting at minus 160. I think the finishing upside here is on the Jauregui side. I actually really love her boxing, and I don't think she gets finished on the ground here absolutely ever. So I think her chin she gets hit, right? But her chin holds up. She's got that Mexican chin. So that check right there. Gomes is actually pretty tough herself. I don't know if she's really been finished at a recent memory. Both these girls, the finishes for Jauregui was kind of versus girls who she was supposed to finish, gets the knockout easily in round one. I don't think, Gomes is that level of competition here. Man, I would really like a over 2.5 bet here, guys. What do you guys think about that?
I like it. Yeah, like I said, I think it does go over. I think Gomes is really tough. And since I think Jauregui wins the fight, I think she probably wins by decision. But I wouldn't be massively surprised if she gets a finish. I don't really know too much about Jauregui's finishing potential because regional scene is regional scene. I know she got finishes there, but we can only judge it on Lucindo and then on Estela Nunes. Nunes
right.
out badly, so I don't even take much away from that, honestly. And then with Lucindo, I think Lucindo's super high level, future top 3, top 5 fighter. So it was no surprise she didn't finish her. So for me, it's very hard to judge. I do lean over though.
Yeah, and you hit me up about this one earlier in the week. I should have remembered. The thing about this one, I was kind of vexed by the question, right? When I think about this fight, what I think about is I think Jauregui's got a bunch of clear paths to victory, but I don't exactly have this like clear vision in my mind of how she's going to win because to your point, I feel like this fight could take a bunch of different iterations. We've got Gomes could come in here and shoot takedowns, or she could try and wing big bombs on the feet and see if she could land a big knockout shot. So I think we could see a little bit of different approaches here. And I wouldn't be surprised to see either woman try and mix it up with takedowns if it gets dicey on the feet. So for that reason, does feel like there's a little bit of added volatility here. I do think WMMA meme-ish finishes on the ground do materialize at times. So that's always my danger factor with the over. But you don't normally see this kind of pricing. So I think as a long-term play, if you're committed to taking these kind of shots, you will make money in the long term. Because to our guy, Pasha Boyer's point in the comment section, he says, I'd safely say 70% of female fights go to a decision. I'd have to pull numbers there, but I tend to agree, man, a lot more often than men's fights. So with that being said, taking these overs when they're discounted, probably not a terrible way to invest. Shout out to our guy, Uncle Weezy. Friend of the show, says, the fellas, great panel. Appreciate you, brother. We're about to kick it off with the Jack Della fight next up. So with that being said, shout out to our guy, Jewish Better, for the good humor as well. I'll make sure I remember you by next time, my brother. We'll start with you. But Jack Della here in this fight at 170 pounds is taking on the UFC newcomer, Josiah Harrell. Josiah Harrell is a very interesting prospect in my view, but at the 155-pound class, right? I think he could win fights in the UFC at 155 today. He comes in with some unique physical intangibles. He's an Ohio wrestler. I got my Beat the Streets Cleveland shirt on today. We got to represent for Ohio guys. BW Wrestling, stand up. You know what I'm saying? But when we're looking at this fight, Josiah Harrell is just a little bit in over his head, right? He's coming in on short notice. He's got a very dangerous puncher in front of him. He's got a guy who's got lethal strikes and a guy who's clearly got the backing of the company. They've been putting him in prime positions. They've been increasing his level of competition slowly, but giving him manageable fights that he could win and look good doing so. I feel like that Randy Brown performance was a bit of a coming out party as well. So they wanted to fast track him, get him in there with Sean Brady, a dangerous guy, a guy with a lot of skills in a prove it spot. If he could stop the grappling there, then he could really be something in the division. We don't get that fight, right? So instead, we get Josiah Harrell, who I do think, my one bold claim in this fight is I think Josiah Harrell is going to take down Jack Della if he doesn't get knocked out in the first couple exchanges. He's got a lot of strength. They call him the muscle hamster. I feel like he's going to get to legs at some point here because I think as soon as he feels one punch from Jack Della, he's going to go, oh, F this, and he's going to try and take him down. I think that for Jack, his utility in this fight is going to be staying calm, staying patient if he gets taken down and getting back up to his feet, because I think his opponent will gas out here probably from anxiety, right? He's coming into the UFC, big card, big moment, big step up in competition. So all those factors, I think he's probably going to gas a little bit faster than normal, but he has a lot of, Matt Brown, a lot of Columbus fighting legends that sign off on this guy. He trains jiu-jitsu in a big city in Columbus. I haven't gotten to train up there very much, but I do know a lot of the fighting, talent in Ohio is basically congregated around Columbus and Cleveland. And I've seen how the Cleveland scene is, but I've heard better things about the jiu-jitsu in Columbus. And I know that the wrestling base there is Ohio State, my man. So very high level. So I wanted to give him that credit and respect before I say, I think this is going to be a brutal loss for Josiah Harrell. Kind of like our guy Jalen Turner, right? Gets fed to Vicente Luque in his UFC debut, but then shows up at 155 pounds and it's a whole different ballgame. That's how I feel Josiah Harrell's UFC career is going to play out, but I think it's too much too soon, and I think he's probably getting finished, unfortunately. How do you feel about this one? Jewish Better, we'll start with you, brother.
Yeah, man, I think the line could be a little bit wide because if we've seen any one problem from Jack Della Maddalena, it's the takedown defense, and he has almost been subbed in some of his fights. I remember Angelusa did have that tight arm triangle. So the thing is, Sean Brady definitely would have had a big grappling advantage on the mat. The thing is with Sean Brady, is he doesn't necessarily have the wrestling to get it there and the striking to back it up as well. I'm not 100% really to be honest, familiar with Harrell. And I don't want to just take a dog shot based off of like something I see on film, get emotionally invested into this guy, and then just take something stupid when it's clear that the UFC just wants Jack Della Maddalena to win. Any of these short notice guys the UFC kind of just brings in like this, I'm immediately skeptical, because especially when it's a short notice, it's a UFC pay-per-view, you know what they want to do. They just want to get Jack Della Maddalena the win here. And that's probably what's going to happen here. This guy's coming on way too short of notice. And like on top of that, he was already preparing for a grappling heavy style in Sean Brady. So I do believe Jack Della Maddalena. The one thing I like about him is he scrambles very well to get back to his feet. Just in that process, sometimes he could give up. He could give up submissions. That's the only worry I would have here in any situation. But I think Jack Della Maddalena all the way. I think he does hit the mat at some point in this fight, but he's able to get back to his feet, starts piecing the combos. The pace and pressure is just eventually going to get to our guy Harrell. Maybe Jack Della Maddalena in round two knockout. We've seen him go a little bit past the round one. I think everybody just thinks automatically he's going to get the round one finish versus Harrell here, but I could see it go a little bit extended, especially, the under 1.5 is probably going to be a popular bet in parlays. I'm going to go with Jack Della Maddalena here. No bet.
I feel you, brother. Never forget the legend, Elvis Bernier, plus 500 on short notice, flies 30 hours or whatever it is to Perth and gets the W. So it is possible, but it's very rare. Like you mentioned, it's not something that we see often. And it is something where the UFC is normally bringing in somebody to fight the A-side guy on short notice. So you got to keep that in the back of your mind. Josiah Harrell, to your point, I think the most distinguished thing about his game, the only thing that separates him from an average MMA fighter, is the fact that when he gets to his top position, he finishes people brutally with the hip down, attack from the mount. Like basically that back mount, he hips down into people and they do not get back up. And I'm telling you, I've gone with Ohio wrestlers that ride the hips like that. 2 boots in is what we call it in wrestling. 2 hooks in is what they call it in jiu-jitsu. But they're not going to a body triangle. They're not thinking like jiu-jitsu guys. They're thinking like wrestlers. And they're going 2 arms underneath, hips all the way down, and flattening you to the mat. In MMA, that is the most brutal spot you could possibly be, and Josiah Harrell has finished a number of guys with that. So that's my only fear factor here. But to kick this over to our guy, James, what I'll mention is Craig Jones, right? Another Oceanic grappling legend, gave some credit to Jack Della. He said, I've rolled with this guy, and he's better than I expected him to be. He's better than most guys in the UFC that I go with. And I found that to be very interesting commentary, because against Angelusa, it didn't look like that, but that was also Contender Series. We talk about UFC jitters. Jack has looked like he's come into his own in confidence lately in his UFC fights. And, the one thing is, Harrell's probably not going to give him the exact fights he wants here, like Randy Brown, who's just dancing around, striking with him on the feet. I think he's going to try and wrestle, but I don't know if he has the size and the cardio and preparation to do so. James, how do you feel about this one?
Yeah, that definitely was something. If Craig Jones is saying that, you definitely have to take note of it. Craig Jones, one of the best grapplers in the world today. And not only that, like, we just spoke about Taira, right? And we said that this guy's an amazing jiu-jitsu guy. He's so good at BJJ. I've seen him being put in deep submissions. Yeah, and he got out of them. I've also seen the same from JDM. I've seen him being put in deep submissions. But he got out of them. So everyone wants to shit on JDM's grappling and wrestling and whatever it is. But the dude's, like, he hasn't been subbed. I think he got subbed in, like, his first fight or his second fight. I know he got knocked out in one of them. First of all, big shout out to JDM, yeah, because the dude got finished in his debut and in his second fight, and now he's in the UFC as like the next UFC superstar. So anybody who's an upcoming MMA fighter, kickboxing, wherever you are out there, if you lose your first fight, don't worry, man. JDM lost his first 2 fights, so that just shows you the mentality of the dude, because if you go out there and lose your first 2 fights, especially by finish, but then you make it to the UFC, you got the heart, you got the mind for the game. And it shows, because he's improving every fight, in my opinion. And I'm just not necessarily on boat that as soon as somebody grapples him, he's going to get finished. Ameev was meant to be that guy, and Ameev got finished, and he got out of Ameev's choke. So I just want to give a little bit of shout out to JDM's grappling, because it's been shit on recently, especially with the Sean Brady stuff and all of that. So, yeah. But in this fight, obviously, I think he's going to win. -1,000. I don't have too much to say, man. Harrell looks all right. but I don't think he's up to JDM's level. It's way too much of a step up in competition. Also, he's at a big size discrepancy here. JDM's the bigger man by a big margin, and it's not going to end up good for him. I mean, Jack Della Maddalena's boxing is very crisp. He's going to land on him early and often. I could see Harrell lasting, to round 2 or something, but I'm not confident enough to play it. So I'm going to pick JDM via KO. I don't think it's a big, it's not a big take. But you have to be careful because remember last time, everyone was playing like JDM KO and he got a submission over Randy Brown. So like we said, he's leveling up his game. He's getting better and better. And he jumped on that choke very, very quickly. It looked like he was been grappling all his life with at least with the quickness of the transition. So yeah, I'm going to pick via KO, but just be careful if you're playing KO at like minus 300 because this is an MMA fight, so you never know.
Yo, I got to correct him real quick. Craig Jones, the best grappler in the world. He just beat Felipe Pena.
I didn't say that.
No, I'm just saying he is.
Oh, you're saying that?
Yeah. He just beat Felipe Pena. So
okay, fair enough.
Felipe was number 1. Yeah.
Craig is the man. I like Craig. He's the man. He's been out here in Auckland helping a lot of the boys. He's been doing seminars. He's been teaching at City Kickboxing for a long time. It's a gym that I go to. So Craig's the man. Shout out to him.
Fuck Craig Jones.
El Segundo, best podcast in the jiu-jitsu world, like to think of my own as up there in MMA. I'm playing, but you know what I'm saying. I think for jiu-jitsu purely, Craig Jones, nobody's doing a better podcast than that guy, so show love. But with that being said, guys, the prelim headliner, one of my favorite fighters of all freaking time, Ruthless Robbie Lawler. He signed my shirt at the UFC 189 press conference before Jose Aldo got pulled from that. You know what I'm saying? That was one of the craziest nights of my life as an MMA fan. The Red King, Robbie Lawler, they both signed the shirt, and it's a classic fight, right? All-timer, Robbie Lawler, legend of the game. Now that we've given our praise, we've said some celebratory things, I also think we got to talk business, right? He's 41 years of age, and he's coming in here. He just did the UFC Hall of Fame celebration tonight. He is going to be retiring pre-fight. He said, I'm retiring after this fight. So for me, that's a guy who's checked out. That's a guy who I really can't afford to bet on. And do they sometimes win in these retirement fights? Yeah, once in a blue moon, they do. I just don't like it in this case because let's look at the historical data. Nico Price, and this will surprise people, has never lost as a UFC favorite. He is 3-0-1 or 4-0-1, depending on the odd services that you check. So basically, everybody his whole career has expected Nico Price to lose every fight for the most part, but when he was favored to win, he's come through. Except for the fight with Cowboy, which I believe was a point deduction that ended up being a draw there. I didn't rewatch the fight, though. So in any case, Nico Price doesn't look like he's very bettable on paper, right? Big chalk price, guy who's very awkward, who can get hurt himself, who's, got janky, herky-jerk style, looks like he's getting older very quickly in the octagon, and he's taken a lot of hard fights, a lot of wars. But he's the much younger guy here, and he has weird, freakish power he always has, where he just touches people sometimes and they die, right? Think about the Randy Brown fight. From his back, hammer fist, the guy goes to sleep. And we've seen Randy tough it out against other guys that landed on his chin. But in that fight, he literally goes to sleep from top position, very rare. James Vick goes to sleep from top position. Granted, James Vick, his chin was severely compromised at that point in his career. However, I don't think he ever saw that coming, and he literally got kicked. He was asleep on the way down as he was getting beat up by Nico Price from the bottom. So Nico Price is a very dangerous guy from all positions. Weirdo. Just has weird power in a lot of weird spots. And later on in his career, he's been throwing a decent volume out there. And that's the one thing that Robbie Lawler can no longer do. He can't match people that are throwing at a high volume. Brian Barberena, he looked like the cleaner, better striker, and he was landing. And by the way, Brian Barberena's durability is questionable. He's been hurt many times. He's been rocked many times. I thought he lost to Matt Brown, who's 40. But he went out there, he took the best shots that Robbie had to offer, and Robbie couldn't keep going at that pace, and he had to close up shop. And I feel like in this fight, he has no motivation to win. He already got all the plaudits and the love and the celebration. I think it's an opportunity to take off those gloves in the octagon, say thank you so much, and ride off into the sunset. So I don't like this fight for Robbie. I think Nico Price is probably going to end up memeing him. And if he doesn't with a knockout shot, I do think he has a chance to submit Robbie Lawler as well. Robbie's been submitted in meme-like fashion a few times in the UFC. I think his cardio could give out on him here. And I think in that case, submissions become live. It's not about technique. It's about route wrapping your arm around somebody's throat who's tired. And I think Robbie could get really tired here and get submitted in meme-like fashion as well. So for me, give me Niko Price inside the distance, unfortunately, and salute the legend. What do you think about this one, James?
Yeah, I agree. I think Robbie Lawler's past his best. He's 41 years of age. I know a lot of people are saying Niko Price is also past his best because I've done quite a few podcasts this week. But I think one guy is clearly, I think one guy is clearly very much past his best, whereas maybe Niko Price is just starting to go on a downslope. Robbie's been on a downslope for 5 years, like since he was champion, since the Woodley fight where he got knocked out. Even the fight against Nick Diaz, that wasn't a good look in my opinion. Nick Diaz came off the couch. Nick Diaz was fat. Nick Diaz was overweight. Nick Diaz landed on him many times. I bet Robbie big in that fight because he was active. He was an active welterweight who had been fighting the top of the division, and I thought he was going to smoke him. He didn't smoke him, man. They were close rounds up until the finish. It's just that Nick Diaz didn't have the pace, didn't have the heart anymore. He quit. When do we see a Diaz brother quit? I thought I would die before I saw a Diaz brother quit. It was sad to watch, right? But I did predict something like that to happen. I predicted him not to. He wasn't taking it seriously, Nick Diaz. He hasn't fought since, The Diaz brothers are strange guys. But that wasn't a great look. Nick Diaz was boxing his head off for some of that fight. He really was, man. He stunned him multiple times. Nick doesn't really have power like that. I mean, when was Nick's last knockout? You think Paul Daly or you think Robbie Lawler when they was like 16 years of age, I mean, those are the ones that are viral at least. I know that Paul Daly one, but I mean, Nick doesn't really have power. Neither does Nate, They're not that type of fighter. They don't have that. They're not that type of athlete, right? They don't have one punch power. But he was stunning Robbie Lawler a few times, and that's not a good look in my opinion. And that was like, when was that? That was like 3 years ago. That was a long time ago, man. I mean, his chin's only got worse and worse, and he gets finished by Brian Barberena. Barberena doesn't finish that many guys. Not really a massive finishing threat, in my opinion. He couldn't finish Jason Witt. Jason Witt has one of the worst chins in the division. So I don't know, man. I think this is going to be a bad ending for Robbie Lawler. I don't want it to be, but it's one of those ones where I think technically the fight can be close. I think Robbie Lawler can do good things in there, even at 41. But it's just like Robbie is going to be willing to exchange, and Nico's definitely going to be willing to exchange. And when they exchange, I'm heavily trusting Nico's power and durability over Robbie's power and durability, both of them. Nico has better power and better durability at this stage, in my opinion. So for that reason, I'm going to back Niko Price via KO. I don't know if I'm going to bet it yet. It's not bad price. I think it's like evens. The under 2.5 is minus 160. I don't know if I'm going to do anything with it. I'll be interested to see if you guys are going to back any form of violence or under or KO prop in this one, because I really do want to back Robbie Lawler to get knocked out on his retirement fight. The R word is a bad thing, and he's been talking about retirement all week. We never like to see that. I don't really love laying chalk on props like that, but sometimes you have to do it. So yeah, I'll be interested to see if you guys are going to do that. But my official prediction will be Niko Price via KO.
We've got people talking about Nico ringworm gate. Shout out to my guy Moy's Audio. We've got people thinking that he might have some knee problems, and my guy Nigel Lee, who does his homework as well. So a couple interesting notes there that will at least make me take a second look here. But I also think that the people in the chat talking about the fight not to go to decision, I tend to agree with that. I do feel like Robbie Lawler's best chance to win this fight is to come out in the early going when he feels fresh and win it by knockout. But I do think there's a small chance that he could just try and outpoint him from the outside, make it last the 15 minutes if he feels like he's in danger, try and grab a hold of him and last the full 15. But I think it's an uphill battle at his age, truthfully. So it's an interesting one. Let's hear what you have to say about this one, Jewish Better.
Bro, I could see something weird happening with the under, because I think the obvious spot, right? Sometimes the more obvious spots are the ones that come to bite you. And I think the obvious spot here is the fight doesn't go the distance, right? And what's the line sitting at right now? So I don't got to go check it. For the under 2.5. I know the under 1.5.
The under 2.5 is minus 163, and the fight not to go is minus 200.
I mean, that's not that hard of a line to bet for two guys like this, especially when we've seen both guys get knocked out in both their last performance. But I'll bring it back to the Cowboy Cerrone fight. Remember that post-fight interview? He poked him in the eye, back and forth, buddy. He kind of looks up to these guys, and I feel like he doesn't go for the finish as much. man, with Nico Price, when it's a guy, another veteran, not a veteran, another guy that he's going up against, another young up and comer, he tends to go for the finish. I've noticed a little bit more going up against the veterans, not so much. And Robbie Lawler, he's had to look up to this guy his entire, probably life. Robbie Lawler's been fighting for, man, let's say he's been in the UFC since 2000, and before that he was even fighting in other organizations. So the guy's been around for absolutely forever. He's 41 years old here, man. I kind of like an over 1.5 bet, but there's just a little bit too much volatility here. And as we know, you're not profitable betting over 1.5 either way. So this is a little bit of a rough fight and a little bit of a sentimental one, but we got to leave the emotion out of it here, man. The one last thing I want to mention, I think that last fight versus Phil Rowe could be a little bit of a way to get people off of Nico Price here, but I don't think you should fall for that, because Robbie Lawler, like Lucrative said, is losing to the ghost of Nick Diaz, a milk bag version of him. He didn't lose to him, but he's getting boxed up by him. Barberena comes in, is able to get the finish. Just too many bad looks, and at 41 years old, you can't tell me a Robbie Lawler bet is a good bet. I don't care if Nico Price is the bronze kneecap, my man, from Jimmy. What is it, from Jimmy Neutron or Fairly Odd Parents? The bronze kneecap, my man Nico Price. So I'm gonna go with Robbie. I'm gonna go with Nico Price here, and he probably gets the finish, but I think it's a little bit later, maybe over 1.5. But I'm gonna stay away from this one completely. If not Nico Price in a parlay.
I heard you. My contrarian angle here would just be a small shot I would consider on price by sub if it hits 10-1. It's currently about plus 900. So if it goes up a little bit more, I would consider taking that as a little bit of an unorthodox stab, because I think he could hurt Robbie Lawler, but I also think he might look, like you said, shows a little bit of humility and grace to the legends. Maybe he'll be a gentleman and just put a choke on out of respect. Hashtag respect. So now shout out to our guy Blood Diamond in the chat. I wonder if it's the real UFC fighter. I hope so. But if not, either way, let's get to the good stuff, he says. No doubt about it. Main card, 5 fights. Here we go. We begin with Bo Nickal. And he's taking on, short notice, Valentin Woodburn. Tell you the truth, guys, I did tape on Valentin Woodburn. The problem I think he's going to have in this fight is that he does not stop wrestling. He likes to wrestle. He prefers to take guys down. He prefers to get into the clinch. He prefers to grab a hold of people. If he preferred to push away and box from the outside, maybe we're having a different conversation. But he wants the fight in the same place Bo wants the fight, and Bo is more technical and more athletic in my view. So I think it's going to be, maybe a little bit difficult. At first, I thought that Jamie Pickett offered more resistance to Bo Nickal than I expected in that early takedown exchange, and then Bo hit him with a nice raised knee to the nuts and got the easy takedown after that, right? He crushed his nuts and made him humble. But in this fight, I feel like what's going to happen is this guy's going to rush into the clinch. Bo Nickal is probably going to hit some insane stepping outside trip, throw him to his back, and then be on top from there. I just think that this guy, if Bo takes a traditional takedown approach, may defend the first takedown and have people a little spooked, because he did show the right ideas regionally. The problem is Bo will have more answers. The deeper they go into wrestling exchanges, Bo is just going to have so many more options, whereas I feel like this guy, he is a power-based fighter. And so to this point, it's all worked beautifully, and I think this is where the rubber is going to meet the road. But that being said, he's fought as high as heavyweight, so I think this money line is frankly a little bit wide. I do love Bo Nickal, but this is a fight at the end of the day, and it's a cage fight. So I think Bo Nickal's going to win and probably make it look easy, but I also just think at plus 1,300, it's a clear dog or pass money line. And the question is just, do you invest in Bo Nickal props? I've had a great time betting this guy, betting unders, betting Bo Nickal round 1 props, things like that I felt like were pretty elementary. But to be honest with you, I could see this going into the later half of round 1, if not early round 2. This guy, you're going to have to teach him how to lose. He's a very tough guy. I've seen him get hit cleanly by heavyweights and no sell it, right? So for me, it's going to come down to just technique, and Bo should be much faster, more athletic, but this is a bigger show. This is a bigger showcase, and he's got a guy who's kind of short, stout, not really a guy with arms flailing all over the place and stuff that makes you easier to submit. He's just kind of a fire hydrant. So for me, I feel like this is actually more competitive effective in some ways in the Tresean Gore fight, despite Gore having some UFC experience, because I feel like Gore's a little more conventional than this guy who's a little bit more power-based and a little bit more awkward. So I think Bo Nickal's going to win, going to roll, but I do think the number is slightly wide here. How do you feel about this one, James? I know that Bo Nickal is set to close as the biggest favorite in UFC history. Do you agree with that?
No, I don't agree with that. I mean, the guy's being lined like the champion of the division. I mean, even the champion of the division, would he be lined at minus 2,500? I mean, probably around minus 2,000. I would say it's just weird. You can't have a guy who's, what is Bo Nickal? Is he 3-0 or is he 4-0?
I want to say 5-0. He's 2 amateur fights also.
He is 4-0 technically as a professional, according to Tapology, and I think that's what is that? 2 fights at the UFC level, 2 fights pre-UFC.
Yeah, so the guy's 4-0, and he's the biggest favorite in UFC history. It makes no sense. It really does. I don't think he's going to lose the fight, of course not, but Woodburn doesn't look great, but I mean, he's not the worst prospect ever to fight in the UFC, Like, there's worse fighters in the UFC. There's some fighters who are, like, on a similar level to him that are fighting in the UFC this weekend, even. I can't get behind minus 2,500. I could never do that. I could probably never, ever get behind that on any fight ever at the UFC level. But I think he's going to win. It's just whether he wins by knockout or submission, I guess. I don't really know, man. I mean, I don't want to waffle on about this fight. There's no point. He's minus 2,500. He's the biggest favorite in UFC history for a reason. He's probably going to win. I have never seen him take a punch, so I don't know whether he can take a punch or not. It's exactly what Pasha is saying. His chin hasn't been tested. We don't know if he can take a punch. He might get folded on the first punch. I tend to think that that's not going to happen. These guys who are really high level at wrestling, they're very tough people in general. So usually their chins are also tough. We do see that a lot. So I wouldn't expect him to have no chin, but we just don't know. We also don't know how he's going to pace himself or if he will gas out, go in 3 rounds. Just speaking about Bo Nickal's career in the future, not just his fight this weekend. Because his fight this weekend, I think he's going to finish the fight in the first round. I don't think you can play submission. What's Bo Nickal's sub in round 1? It's probably about even.
It's like minus 250 or something disgusting, dude. Like, truly, like, it's the worst numbers I've ever seen on a prop. I believe on Bet Online. Let me pull this up on fightodds.io so I'm not speaking out of my ass. But I checked earlier, and it was a disgusting number. Nickal sub is minus 300, and Nickal sub round 1 is minus 250 on Bet Online right now.
I can get it for minus 115. Do you think I should play that then? Because that's a crazy market. I mean, if we say Bet Online is meant to be the sharpest market, do you think I should just hammer Bo Nickal sub round 1 at minus 115 now, boys? Tell me, are we making it this weekend or what?
I could tell you that I have definitely hammered Bo Nickal round 1 in the past. I got minus 175 in his last fight for him in round 1. I felt like it was the gift of the century. And I think the round, or maybe it was fight to end in round 1 was minus 175. So like even if he got memed, it covered that too. It's just an insane price. But what I noticed is, the KO is like plus 240 and the sub is minus 300 on sharp markets. I mean, they're telling you he's going to go for the sub. And the one thing about Bo that makes him difficult to fend off with these submissions is he's got really long arms. So even if he doesn't have it under your chin, he will put it right around your face and he's got a wrestler squeeze. So he'll just go like this and keep pulling on that shoulder and eventually your face will break and your teeth will come out. So it's like you got to tap just on that alone. I do think he could create that situation here. So honestly, my man, I think it's the most likely outcome. I think it's probably closer to 60% here than minus 115. So I do think you're getting value no matter what. But it's tricky. It's tricky because this guy, you got to teach him how to lose, right? He's an undefeated fighter, but Bo Nickal should just be light years ahead. I've seen him grapple black belts and looked like he was not out of his depth for 1 second. The Oliver Tazes of the world, I have notes on it if you guys want to see. So Bo Nickal, he's wrestled and grappled with black belts and didn't look out of place. This guy, he does come from Fusion XL. He comes from a good gym, but it's a lot to ask Bo Nickal on a few days' notice. I mean, that is a tough assignment, but he's being priced accordingly and then some. Let's say that. JB, what do you got on this one, brother?
Nah, I think this line is absolutely nuts. I think Val Woodburn you know, what he lacks for skill, he makes up in physical ability. Um, the thing I don't like about Bo Nickal is just too many questions, like my man Lucrative said. I'm not a fan of his MMA wrestling per se. Like, he's gonna have to catch Val Woodburn super overextended, duck under to get that shot. He was able to get the entry on Jamie Pickett, but I think it's gonna be harder to finish the takedown on a stockier, shorter of Val Woodburn here in this situation. Obviously, Bo Nickal has the wrestling advantage. That's not even a question at the end of the day. We know that, but we've seen him trying to finish arm triangles the wrong way. We've seen him, in situations where he could possibly squeeze his arms out. We don't know how he's going to be the later the fight goes, but we could assume that he's going to have the cardio, man. The guy's been wrestling his whole life. But then back to that, MMA and wrestling are two completely different things. And until he's in the ring and he's in that situation, we just don't have the answers yet. So, if anything, I may throw $10 on Val Woodburn to pull the biggest upset in UFC history. That way, if he does, I pay for my meal. And if not, I just get the sweat. $10 for me isn't a big deal. I'm betting a lot more than that on other fights. So I know some people say you don't bet for entertainment, don't do that. But in this situation, just because it's the biggest favorite in UFC history, I think I'm just gonna throw $10 on Val Woodburn. That way, if he wins, I could say I called the biggest underdog in UFC history. And that's it right there, baby.
Exactly, dude. Even $10 gets you a slice of the pie, right? You're in for life. You could take a picture with it, right? Like, you could meet that guy in person and show him, like, dude, I was on you. You cover up the price then. You just go, oh, bro, look at that. I bet on you, bro. So you can definitely use that for all the love. Shout out our guy, Jimmy the Drunk. Says, shouts to the General Alex Ramirez. Paid $5 for the privilege. So we'll always give you a shout if you drop a dono. Appreciate you hugely, my brother. Longtime listener of the show. So, guys, we're into the meat of it. We've dug into a lot of great fights, but from here on out, it's just hammer on hammer on hammer on hammer. Excellent fights to break down the rest of the way. So I ask you humbly, please drop a like on the video if you have not already. If you guys are new to the channel, go ahead and get subscribed. Hit that notification bell, constantly coming at you with UFC content, talking about the best fights and the best fighters in the world. Appreciate you guys for joining us. Now, let's talk about Dan Hooker and Jalen Turner. I am biased as shit, all right? Let's be perfectly frank. If you guys have been watching this show for a long time, you know exactly why. Jalen Turner is my most profitable fighter on this card, and it's not that close, right? Tatsuro Taira has made me a lot of coins. We've made money with Jauregui. We've made money with Bo Nickal. We've made money with plenty of fighters up and down this slate of fighters. And we'll talk about the fighters we've really struggled with too, because there's some of those. But Jalen Turner has made me 17 units betting on him in the UFC. I have missed on one bet, and it was Uros Medic round 3. I had Jalen Turner round 3 in that fight. But I also had him by sub. I had him by sub against Brad Riddell. I had him inside the distance. I had him on the money line for 5.5 or 5.75 units against Brad Riddell at minus 115. And that was one of my favorite bets ever. It's the fastest you could expect to cash one of these damn things. He went out there, he assaulted the man, and he finished him brutally with a guillotine, which is a man after my own heart, right? The guillotine series that he has is fantastic. It is beautiful. He trains with high-level guys. He gets individualized attention at the Ruka gym. He trains with and seeks out great training partners around the world. He's very young. He's one of the biggest lightweights in the division. I got corrected in the comment section on one of my videos because there are a couple other guys who are 6'3" in the UFC. But let me make sure I qualify this statement with, I don't know that there's anybody who's as big as Jalen Turner in terms of height, reach, dimensions, who also carries this much muscle into this weight class. I feel like Jalen Turner does not get remarked upon for how big and intimidating he is. Most of these guys come out here and they're confident, brutal fighters until they see this guy and they're wrestling for their life and they're trying to grab a hold of him because they realize this guy can hit me from so far away with heavy shots that hurt me. And I feel like Jalen Turner, that's his biggest asset in this fight, is the fact that he could hurt Dan Hooker, who has been hurt in a few of these other fights. I feel like he can match him for length and size, which is something Hooker's not going to be used to. I feel like Hooker's best path to victory here is to wrestle, try and take this guy down. He has underrated wrestling. He has shown in fights in the past, in the recent past, that's how he's been getting his wins. But Turner is undefeated versus Australian fighters. Shout out to my guy Nigel Lee. Australian and New Zealand, the Oceanic fighters, I believe he's 4-0 against them, looking to make it 5-0 this weekend. So, James, we need you to defend your guys. Does your guy Dan Hooker have a good chance this weekend? He's showing up with the blonde hair, the shin tattoos. He's trying to do everything he can to reverse his aging, but I feel like it's all going to come to a head this weekend. Jalen Turner, we're not getting plus 900 on the sub no more. We're not getting plus 700 on the sub no more. It's all the way down at plus 240 and lower for him to win by sub, for him to win by knockout, similarly low prices. So the love has now come around on Jalen Turner. He's a minus 200 moneyline favorite. So not as bullish on playing him here at the prices, but I think he's clearly the side here at the early prices, at the minus 145, at the minus 150. That was gobbled up quickly. I think that was the right side at those prices. So for me, it's Jalen Turner. How do you feel about this one?
Yeah, unfortunately, I agree, man. And I'm always going to root for Dan Hooker and the fighters fighting out of Auckland, New Zealand. But I think he's in over his head here. I got one fighter who's probably on the downswing of his career, and then we got one fighter who's on an upward trajectory. And we've seen with Jalen Turner over the last few years, in my opinion, he's getting better, getting better, getting better. And I think it's just going to be too much for Dan Hooker to overcome. You have to beat Jalen Turner, you have to come through a storm. And I'm not sure Dan Hooker can come through that storm at this stage in his career. We've seen him knocked out in round 1 by Michael Chandler. Seen him knocked out in round 1 by Arnold Allen. We've seen him go to war with Edson Barbosa, get finished there, go to war with Dustin Poirier. He's got a lot of miles on the clock, and he's fighting one guy who's bigger than him, which is very rare in the lightweight division, So I think Jalen Turner's going to land early, man. He's got very, very long-range weapons. Body kick is going to be there all day. He hurt a lot of people with that. Medic, he hurt him with that. Brad Riddell, he hurt him with that. Straight punches. I back Jalen Turner all the time, man. I always bet on him because I think he's a really good fighter. I had a massive, massive bet on him against Jamie Malarkey. One of my best bets, or one of my biggest bets in recent years. And then I also bet him against everyone, really. I bet the under in the Brad Riddell fight. I bet that massive, actually. That was
a big sweat, huh?
Yeah, exactly. And I also bet him against Mateus Gamrot. And I feel like a lot of people were, loads of people bet Gamrot in that spot. And I think a lot of people were overlooking Jalen Turner in that spot. I don't think Gamrot covered minus 200 at all. I think when it was going to the judge's decision, I thought that I might win. I thought Jalen Turner might have won that fight. I still think he might have won that fight. It was a close fight. And that was against an elite grappler. Dan Hooker doesn't have that here. Maybe Dan Hooker can take him down, but he's not going to be able to hold him down. Gamrot couldn't hold him down. I know Gamrot doesn't have great, he has really good takedowns, but he doesn't really have good top control. But still, I just think that Jalen Turner's sort of like the new breed of Dan Hooker. You know what I mean? He's like just a level above. He's the new school. Maybe Dan Hooker can land a knockout blow. I think that's the only way he's going to win here because Jalen Turner doesn't have great boxing defense. I've seen him wobbled multiple times. I've seen him knocked out before. I've seen him do the stanky leg before. And I do think that at some point he's going to get knocked out brutally because I don't think he's shored up that defense or that chin liability. I just don't think Dan Hooker's the guy to do it. I'd like him to do it. I'll be rooting for Dan Hooker, but unfortunately, I think Turner's going to go through him probably in round 1.
I can't really push back on you too much, my man. I'm a Jalen Turner backer. I'm a Jalen Turner fan by and large, and I think that he's just one of the most dangerous round 1 finishers in the lightweight division. Mateus Gamrot's a guy who really avoids danger in a lot of fights by staying insistent on going to the legs, getting on those low singles, kind of an awkward guy to prepare for and to defend. When you're a really tall guy and somebody shoots low on the knee, can make it very difficult for you. But I felt like he did way more damage in that fight, and the way that they score most UFC fights nowadays, damage is supreme, right? But in that case, it was the wrestling, the control, the takedowns that ended up ruling the day. So that's one of the inherent volatilities of betting fights that go to decision, betting fighters that go to decision. And that's why I love Jalen Turner so much. Normally, he doesn't do that, right? And especially when things go well for him. So when it goes to decision, I think that's when things get dicey for Jalen Turner. We saw that against Matt Frivola. We saw that against Gamrot. The later the fight goes, the less intense he is. But he starts so hot. He starts so early. And I feel like Dan Hooker saw, we saw it in the Arnold Allen fight. He really struggled. When Arnold brought it to him right away in that fight, it wasn't the most technical strikes. It wasn't the most sophisticated attack, but he just kept coming forward and throwing big hooks in his face, and Dan Hooker couldn't take the damage anymore. And Granted, that was at 145. Maybe he takes it a little bit better up at 155. But I think cumulatively, he's taken too much damage over the course of his career. He's taken a lot of losses. He's fought as high as heavyweight. He hasn't had the best risk management. And you need elite risk management to survive with Jalen Turner. And I feel like that's not what we're going to see here. I think this is going to be a violent affair. To your point, I think the best chance for Dan Hooker to win is inside the distance here. But I do think there is just a chance that he could get that wrestling path going. We have seen it in the past against the Diakasey's of the world and those guys. His grappling's not bad. He trains with good guys. He's long and awkward. But I do think that his grappling from his back is extremely suspect. We saw that in the Makhachev fight. There was no resistance to most of the passes. There was no proper decision-making and no defense implemented on the Kimura. He was just going to let his arm and his shoulder break. That's not defense, and that's also not smart. That's a way to ruin your career forever. So I just felt like the referee had to save him from himself there, but I don't believe in his grappling long-term. Jewish Better, how do you feel about this one, my brother?
Man, I'm a really big fan of Turner, to be honest with you guys. The guy calls himself the Tarantula. Obvious, big fan of Anderson Silva, the Tarantula, the Spider. And he reminds me a little bit of Anderson Silva. Long, lanky guy. But this guy's at 155 pounds, man. Just an absolute specimen. And just like my man Lucrative said, we got one fighter going on the downward trajectory, one going on the upward trajectory. And if you know me, Jewish Better strategy, I think in this situation, man, the books really need either Jalen Turner or Robert Whittaker to win. That's going to be a very popular parlay. And maybe some people are going to add Volkanovski, but I see that being the one that the books need to crack. And now you see a lot of money coming in on Jalen Turner, so they're adjusting here. I don't want to necessarily take a money line shot on Jalen Turner because I could just get inside the distance, and that's most likely his path. So you're going to definitely want to buy that better price tag if you're on the Jalen Turner side. But the only knock I would have on Turner is he does slow down a little bit the later the fights goes. Now, like, he doesn't death gas by any means, but he definitely slows down, and that's, I think, due to the weight cut. The guy's just such a big man for that weight class, but he's still a little bit young. I think his body, he could still do it. Maybe I'll just wait to watch on the scales, but I like a small bet, maybe like half a unit on Jalen Turner inside the distance here. I think he probably gets it by club and sub. I just don't think Hooker could take it anymore, man. He hasn't been the same since the Poirier fight, in my opinion. And his only win that really mattered was the one. I can't even say Nasser at Hack Press is a good win. Claudio Puelles definitely not a good win, in my opinion. Those were kind of just layup fights for a veteran like Dan Hooker. Jalen Turner, not so much. I think this is going to be the coming out party for him on a big pay-per-view card versus a well-known name in Dan Hooker. I got Jalen Turner here, guys. Bounce back win after the loss.
I like that. Shout out to our guy, Artem MMA, also brought up the point. Jalen went to Dubai to train his wrestling. Got the look with Khamzat Chimaev, the tarantula and the wolf. You know, a weird pairing in the animal kingdom right there. Strange bedfellows, certainly, but I think it still bodes well for him improving as a fighter over time. Still very young, and he hasn't been finished in quite some time. The only guys that have been able to get the better of him have put together smart game plans and out-wrestled him and used his ground game against him. So, again, I do think Hooker, sub 16-1. I can't lie, that did catch my attention for a second, because you go back and rewatch his guillotine series, it's freaking beautiful. Like, Dan Hooker, the Hangman is a great nickname for him. That guillotine series is fundamental. But against a guy like Jalen Turner, I feel like the length that he normally uses to facilitate that is not going to be to his advantage here. I feel like he's going to have a lot of struggles in that. So, good fight, fun fight, but I like the Jalen Turner side. Shout out to our guy, Nigel Lee, says, we forgot he got some sparring with Boris. No, sir, we got it in before the breakdown's over. But with that being said, the featured bout of the evening, oh shit, it's about to go down. You know what we're talking about, boys. We're talking about Robert the Reaper Whittaker taking on Dricuss Du Plessis. Winner gets a title shot at 185. The stakes don't get much bigger than that. Robert Whittaker, he has fought tooth and nail with Israel Adesanya in the rematch. Thought Izzy deserved the win there, but it was a very close fight. Rob made an honest account, and I bet him by decision there. But the truth is, I've never gotten a Rob Whittaker fight right, man. I'm wrong about this guy every time. I thought that Marvin Vettori was going to give him an honest fight, and it just was apparent early on in that fight that Marvin wasn't doing the same damage that Rob was doing. When Rob was landing, he was getting through with bigger connections that mattered, and Marvin just doesn't do that. So I feel like, in hindsight, it was a really, really bad pick by me. It was just not very well thought out. When I look at this fight, I say to myself, Du Plessis at plus 300 is an enticing number because I do think Rob has some chin problems. I think he's been getting chin checked in a lot of fights outside of that recent performance against Marvin. And again, we've seen Marvin go 5 rounds with a bunch of guys. The only guy he's hurt in the UFC in the last 5 years is Jack Hermanson, who also has been scared off by a lot of big punchers. So I don't think Marvin has big power for 185. I think he's one of the weakest hitters in the division based on what we've seen. So very good guy in terms of well-rounded skills, but nothing that jumps out the paper at you. And that's not how you beat Rob Whittaker. You have to do something special. You have to hurt him. You have to compromise him. But it's not like we've seen guys go out there and struggle to do that. We've seen guys like Jared Cannonier hurt Robert Whittaker really bad, have him on ice skates, try and chase him down. Wasn't able to get the finish there. But this is a guy in Dricuss Du Plessis who could change a fight on a dime. The fight against Trevin Giles, I thought Giles landed his best combination of the fight. He lands the big 1-2. He's coming forward. Du Plessis bounces off the cage, throws a looping left hook and a right hand, and Trevin Giles is asleep before he hits the mat, right? Like just weird power in this guy's hands. They call him Still Knocks for a reason. He touches people on the chin and they don't move, right? To quote a great man. So I think that when you watch this kind of fighter, you say to yourself, he's inherently volatile. He's not very technical, so he's going to lose. But I look at these kind of fighters and I say to myself, at plus 300, I think this guy is violent. I think he could finish on the ground. I think he could finish on the feet. I think people were forgetting that he almost had Darren Till finished 10 times in that fight? Like, Darren Till did try his best to survive there. He fought his heart out, and he fought his knee out too, right? Like, he literally gave a lot in that fight to try and win. But Du Plessis emptied the clip on him in round 1, was switching off from wrist control position to wrist control position, battering him. And I was thinking to myself, man, Darren Till is getting effed up here, but Du Plessis is emptying the tank. And I had a bet on Darren Till, so I'm thinking to myself, man, I feel good now. Like, Darren Till has gotten off, he's gotten through the worst of it. He weathered the storm. Du Plessis is going to gas. Du Plessis looked like he was gassing, right? He comes out in round 2. He's starting to flag. He's starting to get hit cleaner by Darren Till, and he starts mixing it up. He starts bringing in some wrestling attacks. I think to do that in this fight would be more difficult. But I also think Robert Whittaker's used to dealing with guys that wrestle very conventionally against the fence and try and take him down with doubles and singles, and he knows what to do there. He's very technical escaping the fence. We saw that against Vittori. But against a guy like this, he's not going to do anything technical. He's going to run his head and chest right into you and try and take you down by being a big barrel chested guy. And that's why we see sometimes he gets reversed, but sometimes he gets on top in good positions, and I would say he makes the most of it when he does so. Against Darren Till, he put him in a lot of bad spots when he was on the ground and then finished him in brutal fashion, and I feel like Du Plessis, he's got a good guillotine series, he's got good attacks from the back, he's not a slouch, and he's a physical hoss at this weight class, so I think at the plus 300 number, it would have to be a dogger pass for me. I could also see a scenario in which Robert Whittaker knocks him out. I mean, I'd be foolish to say otherwise. This guy runs onto strikes. Robert Whittaker, dangerous guy, big head kicks, big punches. But I also think he's susceptible to being hurt. We've seen him flashed by Darren Till. We've seen him hurt by Jared Cannonier. We've seen him buzzed briefly by Kelvin Gastelum. So for me, I feel like this is a guy who could be in danger in this fight. I don't think people are going to get to the window with DDP. So if I have to, fuck it. I might just... Dogger pass for me. James, what do you think about this one?
Yeah, I agree, man. If you're talking about money lines, I think DDP is a little bit wide. He's obviously a very dynamic finisher. You know, every single time DDP fights, he gets shit on. You know, he gets clowned. People say he's not a good fighter. People say he's terrible. He's a meme. You know, you hear this all the time. Meme. He's going to get beat. You know, he's soon going to get beat. He's going to get beat. Everyone tries to fade him. Everyone loses their money consistently. Yeah, he's 19-2. There's a reason the guy's 19-2. There's a reason the guy's got every single win he's got has basically been a finish, at least in the UFC, other than that Brad Tavares one, which should have been a finish multiple times. DDP has a lot of skills that work in MMA. As I said, there's a theme in this podcast. At the end of the day, it's a fist fight. It's not all about who's the better martial artist. Maybe DDP's not the best technical striker. Maybe he wouldn't win a lot of Thai boxing fights. Maybe he wouldn't win a lot of karate fights. Maybe he wouldn't win a lot of boxing fights. Maybe he wouldn't win a lot of any martial arts specific discipline. If he went into jiu-jitsu, wrestling, he'd probably get tapped out. He'd probably get tech forward. He'd probably get knocked out in all these different disciplines. But when you come in the cage to MMA, he's 19-2. It's very hard to beat him because he puts things together. MMA is a different game, man. It's not about technicality a lot of the time. It's just about physicality and pace, pressure, and who's willing to dig deep. And we know for a fact DDP will dig deep. How many times we've seen him blowing out of his ass, completely gassed, and he comes back to get a finish. He does it almost every fight. I mean, the guy has an uncanny ability to look completely done and come back. That's because he's got heart, you know, and you can't teach heart. At the end of the day, no matter how many times you go to the gym, no matter how much of a black belt, 10 stripe you are, red belt, coral belt, whatever you want to say, you can't teach heart. You know, it doesn't matter how good you are at MMA or any martial art. And we know that DDP has great heart. That goes a long way. With that being said, he's significantly the inferior martial artist in this spot. I do think that he has a decent chance of knocking Rob out. Like you said, Rob has been hurt multiple times in his career. He got knocked out by Stephen Thompson. He got dropped all over the place by Yoel Romero many times. He got knocked out by Adesanya twice in the first fight. They only ruled the second round one a KO. He got dropped by Adesanya in the first round in the second fight. He got dropped by a step-in elbow by Darren Till. And he got rocked by Jared Cannonier. He's been hurt multiple times. And I think at some point he's going to get knocked out again. Is it going to be DDP on the weekend? I don't know. I do think that the books are underrating DDP, though. I do think he does have a good chance of doing it. Rob hasn't fought anyone like Du Plessis in a while, or probably ever, because he's so unorthodox. As we said, he's not a traditional martial artist. He bounces in and out of range, just like Robert Whittaker actually does. So I do think, you know, Dricuss could time him. I think Dricuss can get a takedown. I think his ground and pound is solid. I think his offensive submission game is pretty solid as well. So I do think the line's a little bit wide. But what I like better in this fight is actually the under 2.5 rounds at -135. In any Dricuss Du Plessis fight, the under 2.5 is a good bet. I think I've bet under 2.5 so far. I bet it. I don't know if I just cut off there, but I think I've bet the Dricuss fight in every under 2.5 rounds in every Dricuss fight. And I lost in the Brad Tavares fight. Somehow that fight went to decision. And I lost in the Darren Till fight because it ended inside the distance over 2.5 rounds. So that was upsetting. But basically,
it seems my guy Lucrative may have cut out for just 1 second. So
back
what
now?
will... Oh, there you are. Yep, absolutely. Fire away.
sorry, brother. I don't know where I got up to, but I was saying that I like the under 2.5 rounds. Any Du Plessis fight, you should bet the under 2.5 rounds because it's usually a good bet. The guy fights very well offensively, but he's open defensively. I think more often than not, Rob gets his first finish in like 4 years here because I do think that Robert Whittaker times his opponents very well. And when you're such a level above in the striking, opportunities are going to arise, right? And I do think that lead leg high kick he does is going to land here. I also think the bouncing in and out of range, he could hit DDP with a straight or with an overhand. So I do think Rob could get a finish here, but I also give a lot of credence to Dricuss getting a knockout. So for me, I love that under 2.5 rounds here. I think it's a really good bet. If this fight goes to decision, I'd be quite surprised, man. So I'm on DDP money line plus 300, and I'm also on the under 2.5 rounds minus 135.
You know, I actually got burnt on that same exact line on the fight not to go on the Brad Tavares fight. And
Yeah.
what I took away from that fight, though, my biggest takeaway was Brad Tavares has lost to Yoel Romero, Israel Adesanya, and to Aaron McKenzie, I think it was, in 2014 via decision. He's 12-4 in decisions. The only other guy to beat him in a decision is Du Plessis, the guy with the terrible cardio that won rounds 2 and 3. Against Brad Tavares, who's, again, a very seasoned guy that, by the way, was present on Israel Adesanya's rise up to the championship. He went 5 rounds to a decision with Brad Tavares, right? So I think he absolutely beat the shit out of him there. So it was a clear win for Izzy, but just the point being, Brad Tavares has kind of been that stepping stone for future title challengers before. So I think that in that case, he makes for an interesting challenge here. You know, Du Plessis, he's not as proven, but that's why he's a big underdog. And when you get big underdogs like this, sometimes you're buying into upside. I think there's more unknowns than this line would suggest. This line suggests we know that Du Plessis is easy to knock out. He's been knocked out once. It would suggest that he's completely going to gas out in this fight. He went to a decision with Brad Tavares, became one of the 4 men that's ever beat him by decision in 16 opportunities. So again, I just feel like there's some data points to suggest this guy is slightly underrated in the UFC, and he's been a favorite in every UFC fight. Now he's a plus 300 underdog. What happened? Did he start sucking overnight, or why did the market go from? And I mean at close, right? I think he opened a dog against Tavares and then got bet to a favorite there. But basically, the market has had some love for him in every fight, and now he's a big dog here because you've seen Whittaker pay off his price before, right? He's been very productive as a favorite. But how long can that last? We'll find out Saturday night. Jewish Better, what do you think about this one, brother?
Yeah, I understand why some people would think you would have to pay a premium for Robert Whittaker in this spot. But I just think, like you said, there's too many unknowns. This fight could be very volatile. It's at 185 pounds. But we've seen this time and time again. I say it all the time, especially on these big pay-per-view cards, man. They got to bust the parlay somehow. And I wouldn't be shocked if we see on the screen, $100-something thousand came in on Jalen Turner and Robert Whittaker and blah, blah, blah. And every single time, the parlay just goes down the drain. Every single time. So if it's not Dan Hooker, it's going to be Dricuss Du Plessis, in my opinion. Unless they made so much money off of us last week with all those underdogs. They absolutely murdered most people last week. So just remember that. Keep that in mind. But I think they're greedy. Vegas is greedy. They like making money, especially on these big pay-per-view cards. People are going to be out of the books. They absolutely have no idea what they're doing. And it's very easy to just say Robert Whittaker's only lost to Israel Adesanya in the last whatever. He's only lost. Like, that's going to be the narrative. He's only lost to Israel Adesanya. But look, like, you got to look deeper into those wins. Marvin Vettori, while he's obviously a top 10 guy, middleweight is very thin, very thin. And Vettori, he's not shown up in fights. We've seen it recently with Jared Cannonier, where he had him hurt early. As the fight goes on, Jared absolutely takes over. Remember the fight with Jared Cannonier? Jared Cannonier actually had his moments in that fight, and that was a spot I actually had Cannonier in, and I kind of regret it. But we got to remember also early in that fight, a lot of people don't mention Jared Cannonier broke his arm blocking a kick from Whittaker. Now, it does speak to the power that Whittaker has in his kicks, but I think Du Plessis has more than a shot here, man. He's the end of the day at plus 300 underdog. The one thing, like Lucas said, we know about him is this guy's gonna fight for your dollar. And there's nothing besides that one KO before the UFC that shows me that this guy has any type of durability issues. I actually think he's quite the opposite. I think he's very durable, and we've seen the later the fights goes, even when he's gassed, he's able to take shots. So, at 27, I believe he is. He's going to make the improvements. Whittaker's still young too, so you could say that. But I think he's been around longer, and we've seen him be hit, guys. Like Liam said, the elbow from Terrence Hill getting dropped by Izzy twice in the first fight, and in the second fight, he dropped him early, and for some reason kind of pulled back as the fight went along. I think if he pressed forward a little bit more on Whittaker, he would have been able to finish him there. And I think Du Plessis is constantly going to be pressing forward. The thing about Whittaker is he could fight going all ways. He could fight going side to side. He could fight going forward. He could fight going backwards. I think he may try and mix in the grappling early here, get the muscles of Du Plessis tired, because that's what we've seen Du Plessis slow down. Not necessarily just striking, but when he's grappling, the lactic acid does seem to build up and does slow down as the fight goes on. But I got Du Plessis here, man. I think actually what's going to happen here, and just call me Mystic Jew if this does happen, I think he's going to hit Du Plessis. He's going to have him rocked. I think he's going to rush in for the finish, and I think Du Plessis is going to catch him. And that's how I see this fight ending. I got Du Plessis by knockout, especially if Hooker isn't able to get the job done for the books. DDP, we're going to get some new blood in this middleweight division. I think that's super important here because we really don't have a clear title contender unless you're going to go with Sean Strickland. And I don't think the UFC wants Sean Strickland anywhere near a title opportunity or a possible win because that would be just a PR nightmare for them. So big fight between DDP and Izzy. Can't sell a Robert Whittaker 3, in my opinion. That's just my humble opinion, as I don't want to buy that fight again. I know what I'm getting there.
You know what's funny though? The only selling point I think for the Whittaker rematch would be they just signed a big deal with the Oceanic region to come back and do a bunch more shows there, to do a bunch of big pay-per-views over there as well. So I'm sure they're going to owe them some title fights. They're going to owe them some big fights. And Robert Whittaker, maybe over here he's just regarded as another great UFC fighter, but he is like the cream of the crop in terms of Australian MMA. Been around for a long time, stacking wins. Has that big stadium show in his history with Izzy as well. So I think he'd love to get that one back on home soil.
For sure. Quick question for you. Do you think Robert Whittaker needs a finish here to solidify a title shot? Because that could be in the back. No, not at all. Okay.
So
fair enough.
They're already doing it. DDP, I don't think this has been announced, but DDP and Robert Whittaker have both agreed to the Israel Adesanya fight in the Sydney pay-per-view in September 10th. Whoever wins, and so is Izzy. So whoever wins this fight, they're doing that. You'll see that announced shortly. That's what I've been told from good sources. So we'll see. But I think regardless of whoever wins, they're going to give them the next title shot.
That makes sense. So I don't doubt you there. And I don't think they want Strickland anywhere near a title.
I haven't seen his Joe Rogan podcast. Have you boys seen it?
No, I still have to check it out.
Yeah,
we're gonna have to watch. Good watch.
Oh yeah, okay.
All right, well, now we got a certified endorsement, so I know what I'm doing after this if I'm still awake. 3:39 local time, but we do not go to sleep when we're tired. We go to sleep when the job is finished. So with that being said, let's talk about this co-main event of the evening. Had a unanimous underdog call there. We're not talking about we all think he's going to win the fight and we would pick him outright, but we're talking about where we would prefer to wager our money. We would prefer to take that plus 300 underdog price on Du Plessis than to lay the big chalk against him with the very talented Robert Whittaker.
Bro, plus 3.5 too on DraftKings, not a bad bet. I may consider that.
Interesting. I don't know the price there, but I think he could definitely win around here. But I do think he's actually going to be pretty finish dependent. That's the one thing is I feel like Du Plessis could lose every minute of this fight and find a way to win because he's just that kind of fighter. So for me, his danger factor is a big consideration. But that being said, guys, we got a flyweight title fight, and it's a rematch. It's a trilogy bout, and one of the rare trilogies where one side comes in 2-0. One of the rarer trilogies where the side that comes in 2-0 is going to be the plus 175 underdog. We got Alexandre Pantoja taking on Brandon Moreno, the assassin baby. He's back in the role of defending champion once again after besting Kai Kara-France in his last fight. Not a fight that was without issue. He did have some adversity in that fight. He was potentially dropping some rounds there. Certainly very competitive back and forth exchanges on the feet. But then he landed that big body kick that changed the complexion of the fight. He had the spinning shots as well. So just was able to get to his decisive offense in round 3. Close the show there on Kai Kara-France. But I think we've seen Kai Kara-France kind of succumb to pressure in the past. He's a good fighter, but he's a guy that can be hit, can be hurt. Royval gets the credit for the submission win. He had him blitzkrieged on the feet there. Kai Kara-France landed a big shot, tried to jump in behind it, got hit with a spinning elbow, never was able to recover there. The finishing instincts from Royval kicked in. So I feel like when we look at a guy like Moreno, and we look at his wins in the division, he's done a very good job, but he hasn't always distinguished himself from his opponents with a huge gap, right? He's gone to very close competitive fights with Figueiredo a number of times. He had a close competitive fight with Royval that he ended up, the shoulder separation there ended the fight prematurely. I think Royval would like to have that one back, to tell you the truth. And I think that this is a very competitive fight in the early going. But I bet Pantoja against Royval because I think he's a clearly better grappler, and I also felt like he could compete with him on the feet and keep it honest. And I felt like his cardio was starting to show real flags in that fight when he got the sub, and I was like, thank goodness. I felt like I was bailed out a little bit. Bet him at minus 155 there. I actually took a small position on Alex Perez against Pantoja last time out, which was very foolish in hindsight, right? It didn't end up looking like a good bet at all. But I just thought to myself, if Perez is able to extend him here, I feel like he might be able to keep this pace going for longer because I didn't like what I saw. And then obviously the fight ends very quickly there. So we didn't get to see Pantoja extended. Pantoja is an elite hammer, right? Just an absolute murderous guy from the top position. Great fundamentals, great jiu-jitsu, great transitions, good power on the feet. But when he's 33 years of age in a very young division historically, when they're finally giving him the shot after waiting him out, making him get a bunch of wins in a row, I feel like for Pantoja, he's not a guy that the UFC has always put the marketing dollars behind. They haven't always been as interested in him, and the fan base has reflected that a little bit as well. He's very dangerous. He's very sneaky. I do think he could represent value here at plus 175 if he wins this fight in the early going. But I also think to myself, the bookmaker's not born yesterday, right? And they are opening this, at a significant price where they're favoring Moreno here, despite the fact that he's lost in the past. I think because he's improved significantly. I think because he's put together his own camp in Vegas, where Mikey Musumeci is coming in and looks like training with him full time for the last little while. He's been bringing in his own coaches, his own corner. The level of preparation seems to check out for me here for Moreno, and this was after he looked a little bit disheveled with the Krause situation, with all the stuff he had going on outside the octagon, still was able to find a way to win against Kai Kara France. Now he's got an older opponent that he's got all the motivation in the world to go out there and beat because he's lost to this guy in the past. So I think that this is a fun fight, an exciting fight. As I kick it over to my guy Lucrative, I just want to say, if this is the actual blood diamond from the UFC in this chat, please go ahead and message me on Twitter, message me on Instagram, get at me in some way. Would love to have you drop some of your thoughts on the show. But with that being said, James, how do you feel about this fight? What do you got?
Bro, have you seen Blood Diamond's comments? He's having an argument with someone in the chat. I don't think that's actually Blood Diamond, bro.
I don't think so either, but dude, if I get a message from this official account, Blood Diamond's on the show. It's that simple.
Yeah, definitely, bro. Yeah, so Pantoja Moreno. Look, this is a weird fight. I want to kind of give a different perspective that I haven't heard all week from anyone I've spoken to, even people I respect a lot. They're actually disagreeing with me a little bit. Just to give the viewers something a little bit different, because I don't think you would have heard this before. I have a theory, right? And I don't know if you agree with me or not, Liam. I'd like to hear your take. But everybody says that there's a massive cardio discrepancy between Moreno and Pantoja. And that's what I thought before watching tape. Because I know that he gassed out in multiple fights like Askarov and Royval. He gassed out terribly. I was surprised he got the submission there. I thought the guy was breaking, right? But that was just flashbacks in my head. When I actually watched tape, I realized something. I realized that the two fights that he's gassed out in the last 5 years have been Askar Askarov and Brandon Royval. And both of those fights, there was a lot of scrambles, heavy wrestling exchanges, and a lot of grappling. The two fights that he hasn't gassed out in, that have gone the full distance or a long time over the last 5 years, have been Manel Cape, 3-round fight, landed 72 strikes in that fight. Stand up with Manel Cape, who's one of the best strikers in the flyweight division at the moment. Very impressive fight. Pushed the pace, took the center of the octagon, did not back down once, and he didn't gas out at all. Not at all. He wasn't even breathing heavy. And then the other fight, this was a long time ago, but Manel Cape wasn't that long. The other fight was the Figueiredo fight, long time ago, right? But it was 3 rounds, heavy pace. He got dropped many times, got wobbled many times, and he was the one pushing the pace, taking the center of the octagon. Now, why did he not gas out in those fights, but he did gas out in the Askarov fights? Well, I've already alluded to it. They were grappling fights. The Cape and the Figueiredo fight, there wasn't too much grappling there. It was mainly striking fights. So I have a theory that he's gassing out due to heavy grappling pace, which does happen to a lot of fighters. You know, you guys are grapplers. You know how you can get gassed out from grappling versus striking. You can't take a break in grappling. You can't take a break in striking. A lot of people think you're taking a break when you're up against the cage. You're actually not. It's very hard. You can't take a break, stay at range in striking. You can't do that with grappling. You can kind of dictate the pace of the fight. So I think that maybe he's gassing out because it's grappling fights. Now, I might be wrong. You know, it might just be that he is getting a bit older. It is flyweight. He's gassing out a little bit more lately. You know, the Cape fight was a longer time ago than the Royval fight, for example. So maybe he has gassed out during those 2 years. Maybe his cardio has let him down. But I'm not 100% sure about that. I don't know that there's this massive cardio discrepancy. But the market thinks there is, because that's most certainly baked into the line. It must be based on cardio. It isn't based on much else. Yeah, maybe some improvements from Brandon, but I think it's mainly cardio. I think it's mainly cardio based because this is a 5-round fight. Because Pantoja's 2-0 against Moreno. So if it's skill for skill, then I think this is an even fight. If not Pantoja a favorite. Moreno should be the underdog. So I think the cardio is baked into the line. But I'm not a believer that the cardio is 100% true. Would I be shocked if Pantoja does gas out and the cardio happens to be true? The discrepancy is in Moreno's favor? No, I wouldn't. But would I be massively shocked if he actually is able to, match him on cardio for 3 rounds and win 3 rounds and then not get finished in round 4 and round 5 and win the decision? No, I wouldn't. I think the market would be shocked, but I wouldn't be shocked. So I just wanted to make that point about the cardio because I don't think anyone would have looked at the fight this way. I mean, maybe I'm sure there's some people out there, but from who I've spoke to, from what I've heard, when I look at the market, I haven't really seen anybody speak about that. So, that remains to be seen whether it's true, but I think that's worth noting. Now, on the other hand, in speak about the actual fights, Moreno's 0-2, and I think that has a big psychological effect coming into this fight, right? If you know that you've been beaten to a pulp and 30-26 by your opponent, that definitely plays on your mind a little bit. If you know that he was the only guy in your MMA career over 20 plus fights, 30 fights that has submitted you, that again plays on your psychology coming into a fight. This is a trilogy fight. Pantoja has not only defeated this guy, he's not squeaking out decisions against Moreno. He's beating him 30-26, dominating him, and he's submitting him. So I think that's going to play a factor in this fight. We know that Pantoja has some deadly skills on the ground. His backpack position is one of the best in UFC, let alone the flyweight division. In the whole UFC, when he gets to that backpack position, is unreal. He can jump to the back from anywhere. I know you guys remember when he fought Askar Askarov, and he was like, Askar Askarov was in north-south, but he was standing up over him, and then he jumps through his legs and takes his back. I've never seen that before. And I mean, Pantoja can find the back from anywhere. It doesn't matter where he is. He can jump on it from standing. We've seen that. He can get from when he's flat on his back and you're standing up and he ends up on your back. So I think that he has a lot of ways to win this fight. Submission, I think he can take him down and lock up 2 or 3 rounds. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is that I think there's some value on Alexandre Pantoja at plus 180. The thing that's worrying me is like, I've seen a couple people on Pantoja and he was plus 160 and now he's plus 183. So I guess there's a lot of money coming in on Brandon Moreno or some respected money coming in. But for me, I've played Pantoja here. I don't understand why Brandon Moreno is minus 200. I really don't. Why? Because why? What? Because he's got seemingly much better cardio and it's a 5-round fight. He might get finished in round 2 like he did last time. I mean, I don't know, man. For me, I think this fight should be closer to a pick'em. So I played Pantoja for 2 units. And we'll see if I'm right or wrong. But I'm confident that with the knowns, I'm getting value pre-fight. Whether that pans out post-fight, I don't know. But with the knowns, I'm confident I'm getting value.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple things factoring into this line. The biggest thing being, and this is something that surprised me, which is why I'm sharing it with the audience right now. Who is the biggest social media star on this card? It is Brandon Moreno, and it is not actually very close. He has 2.1 million Instagram followers. For whatever reason, his simple gimmick of just being a nice guy who likes Legos and goes out there and has barn burner type fights, he's gotten a lot of love and respect, especially from the general public. Plus, he does Latin American commentary for the UFC. So he's a much more public figure, right? Pantoja's got like 50,000 Instagram followers. He's been fighting in the UFC forever. And so a guy who's more likely to go overlooked by the public is definitely Pantoja. But for me, the tricky thing that I'm having a problem with is the line, right? Because like you said, James, it feels like it should be closer. It feels like it should be getting tighter, closer to fight time, and it's going the other way, which is just making me say, am I missing something here? Is there an injury that's undisclosed? These kind of things that make you a little bit more nervous. But truthfully, I do think Pantoja is a killer. My only difference would be I think he is going to empty the jug trying to kill this guy in the first 2 or 3 rounds. That's personally how I see it going. But I think that's a good way to win the fight. We've seen him do it in the past and have success. But Pantoja is not a guy that has 5-round experience at a very high level. So I think that's the one hang up I have. But to your point, we've seen guys before just go out there and hang on, right? Maybe he doesn't look as good. It's Aljamain Sterling, Petr Yan. He's hanging on to him. He's taking shots. He's looking like he's getting hit with shots. But he gets the 3 rounds at the beginning that matter, and he wins the fight. So I'm not ruling that out, but I do have a gut feeling that this fight's not going to decision. I think everybody's going to look at the fact that they've had 59 combined professional fights that have all ended, none of which they've been finished, right? So 59 pro fights between the two of them. Neither one's been finished as a pro. One finish loss for Moreno on an exhibition against Pantoja, right? So that's what makes this fascinating. But I think the 5 rounds creates opportunities to finish, and I think the fact that both these guys are dynamic scramblers. I do think Moreno is a guy that can create some of that scrambling cardio dynamic that you talked about in some of those fights where he's shown weakness, but we may see him averse to grappling with Pantoja as we have in previous matchups, because when he did, it went sideways for him, and he put himself in some vulnerable situations. So I felt like the fight ends by sub at the early numbers was an interesting look here, because I think both guys like to finish by sub. I think they both prioritize it. And what better closure if you're Moreno than to try and submit the guy that submitted you? But also, Pantoja is just a lethal submission grappler. We're seeing sharp markets take a bunch of action on his sub prop down to plus 275 compared to plus 450 on some other markets. So for me, I think that this is a fight where Pantoja is a very live underdog. I think we're like your point about parlay busters, Jewish Better, as I kick it to you. They're going to need parlay busters throughout this card. Moreno, he's positioned as a favorite that people are going to want to click into their lineups at a nice minus 200, gets you closer to even money on a lot of these plays. When you've got a big favorite like a Bo Nickal, when you've got a big favorite like a Volk, and you're trying to parlay them up, you're going to need something a little bit closer. A Robert Whittaker. All these guys, look how close they are in proximity on the card as well. All big favorites, all 5 in a row. You think they're all cashing? I don't think so. And I think Pantoja, just like Dricuss before him, is a live underdog. So interesting shout there from our guy James, and he's putting his money where his mouth is as well. Already got some units in play. Jewish Better, how do you feel about this one? I know you're a jiu-jitsu head like myself. Do you think Pantoja rides for the jiu-jitsu community, or do you think Brandon Moreno gets back on track for Mexico?
Yeah, I agree with you on the aspect that they need parlay busters, but you could also go against that because I think public money bettors aren't betting as much as the guys that are really into the community, right? And if you're really into the community, you already know Alexandre Pantoja's beaten this guy 2-0, right? He's already gotten the 2 wins over him. So you could say on the other end, Pantoja could be a little bit of a big underdog this weekend, that a lot of people are going to be backing their money on him. But I just do agree with Lucrative here. In hindsight, no matter how you put this bet, when you're going in this fight, you know you have value here. You're almost certain for sure you have value on the Pantoja side, because everything analytically should be saying this is an absolute pick'em fight. Or if not, Pantoja is a slight favorite. So, right, you could get a little bit sketched out by the line. I don't think it's so much of a cardio issue on the Pantoja side. I know some people are saying that, but you do have to factor in the 5-round experience for Brandon Moreno, and that's no doubt. But I just think it's a little bit too factored in the line. So hopefully what my hope is, this line comes down a little bit to that minus 150, minus 160 range, and I could get a shot in on Moreno, because I do think he has the experience here. But my favorite bet on this fight, I'm going to be going with the fight starts round 4 or the over 3.5. I like as well. Over 3.5 sitting at minus 175. So that's a little bit juiced. This is a flyweight fight at the end of the day. And as you said, neither guy's ever been finished. I don't see Moreno going out unless it's a sub. The dude's got a Mexican chin. On the other end, he's not necessarily a finisher. Let's go back and look at all these guys' finishes. Last finish for Brandon Moreno was the Kai Kara France. That was a liver shot. That wasn't like a headshot or anything. He caught him right in the liver. Let's just chalk that up to that. A little bit of randomness, volatility. We know this is fighting that happens. Fight before that, he got the finish versus Figueiredo. Figueiredo, I feel like with Figueiredo, you're just flipping a coin to see if this guy's weight cut was good on any single given fight. If not, he's going to get death gassed the later the fight goes, and that's going to open up finishing opportunities for Moreno. The finish before that was the shoulder with Brandon Royval. I just can't count that, my man, because although you got to count it because it was a finish at the end of the day, but a little bit of a wacky finish, right? When you go to the Pantoja side, I believe
if anything was ever meme-like, it's getting slammed onto your shoulder and then being yelling to the corner, put it back in and whatever. It was a weird stoppage, no doubt.
Very weird, extremely weird. And let's just I'll just name a few like Wilson Reese, not a great win, or just a knockout win for Pantoja. Naming a few other, I could keep going, but Alex Perez, he just came out there, kind of just pressured right immediately. That was a weird fight, dude. Backpacked them immediately and was just able to get the job done right away. Like if you had a bet on Pantoja there, that was one of the easiest cashes. I know you said you had Perez, probably a heartbreaker as it went on, but Pantoja's talented,
If you're
man.
gonna break my heart, do it at the beginning.
Right.
I would prefer that, right? Don't get my
Don't make me
heartbeat going. Don't make me go to round 3. Just get cleaned up and be done with it.
Don't make me wait.
Kevin Lee last week, he did us a favor, right? It wasn't our best bet. We put it out there, and then unfortunately our guy goes down. You just got to say, hey, Kevin, at least you made it quick, brother. At least you made it quick.
Ketlin Souza, but you know what? This is a pay-per-view. This is our first pay-per-view on here, and Dricuss Du Plessis is going to win this week, so we're not worried about that. I'm just gonna go with the over 3.5 here, dude. I don't want to pick a side in this one because the line sketches me out. I think Pantoja is the sharper bet at the end of the day, but something in my heart tells me that the Mexican's gonna win this fight. The UFC definitely wants that Mexican market, but if this is even just a close fight or whatever, they could run this right back in Mexico or wherever they're going. So we'll see about that. I really like the over 3.5 here though in a flyweight fight. Minus 175, so you got to lay a little bit of juice, but I think that's for good reasoning. Both these guys, super durable.
Love it. And I think that honestly, flyweight's in a good spot either way. You got a couple guys starting to make their way through contention in the lower end of the division, but also at the top. Brandon Royval starting to put on that fresh coat of paint, right? Looking like he could be ready for that title challenge, that opportunity, getting the big finish over Mateus Nicolau. I thought that was a nice feather in his cap. So flyweight, fun division right now. Want to just give one piece of contrary advice, which is Pasha Boyer says, I will die if Pantoja knocks him out this time. Then he would have the MMA triple crown, right? The sub, the decision.
The cycle.
And yeah, exactly. He's hitting for the cycle. But the other thing is, our guy Blood Diamond says Pantoja by sub or points is the ultimate lock. I think people would be surprised revisiting that last fight with Moreno, where he had a lot of success on the feet. And also, guys, Moreno's got a great chin. He's got the Mexican heart, all that stuff. Look at his eye in the Kai Kara France fight. Dude, a doctor could stop that fight. A doctor could come in, and if you get busted open there, stop the fight right there. So Pantoja plus 1,400 by KO will look really foolish if the eye swells up the same way in round 1, and people are like, holy shit, like Moreno's now on the brink of being TKO'd at any point in this fight. This is still a very volatile sport at the end of the day, and I think that's a big aspect of the volatility. It also speaks to our guy Nigel Lee's point. He said Pantoja plus 140, yet the decision and sub are both plus 400, and that's what people are leaning towards here as the most likely logical outcomes. But what if our guy Pantoja goes out there with some bad intentions, throwing big shots on the feet like he has his last couple fights, and puts this guy away or gets a doctor's stoppage? Then I know for sure people will be crying in the coffee, and the general public will not be too happy with that, because I think a lot of people will be looking more towards the sub looks, or if they're trying to get inventive, maybe towards the decision props on either fighter. So for me, that's another element where sub and points and those kind of double chance methods, I really try and avoid them. I either like to go decision or ITD. That's a personal preference, but it's something I like to stick to.
Could I tell a quick story about that real quick, dude? One time my friend, he the worst double chance bet I've ever seen in my life. Dude put like hundreds of bucks, and mind you, the line difference was only minus 10. This is like early noob days, and like I didn't have I told him not to do it, but I wasn't 100% sure. I couldn't really argue it, but it was Juliana Pena versus Jermaine Durandamy, and he said there is no way Juliana Pena gets submitted by Jermaine Durandamy, and you would not believe his face when she got front choked. It was the funniest thing. I said, I've never been a double chance in my life. That's my story.
I love it, brother. The ninja choke forgives nobody, right? You could just get caught in there for a couple seconds. It's a wrap, right? The ninja choke, it's basically impossible to get out of unless you're a really good grappler and you find some crazy escape route or pull the elbow right away. It's a finishing move. It's over. So I feel like that was all she wrote there. And unfortunately for your friend, he learned a good lesson the hard way there. I'm sure there's times when there's value, but for me, it's something I always try and avoid, because those popular mush props, they can get you burnt, man. Think about JDM against Randy Brown. Everybody's on the KO. Maybe if they were really thinking it through, KO or decision, right? Like maybe Randy sticks up to the pressure. But then what happens? He submits him, and then you're like, I can't believe it. Why did I lay chalk on this prop? that was foolish in the end. So that's one thing to just keep in mind. But guys, you know what time it is. It's main event time. So smash the like if you haven't already. Make sure you're subscribed if you're not already, because it is 4 o'clock in the goddamn morning Eastern time, and I'm still here rocking with you live. Alexander the Great Volkanovski. He has been one of my money makers on this show. He's been one of my guys, going back to the well with him. When did we get off the train against Islam Makhachev? Too much, I felt like it was asking. However, if you took the shot, you had a great value bet, right? You felt really good, whereas everybody who bet Islam Makhachev had a puckered asshole, right? We could all call it like it is, right? So I felt like Islam won the fight, but I felt like it was very close. I felt like Volk made a great account of himself. But here's my red flags on Alexander Volkanovski really quick. And it's just that, number one, he's cutting back to 145. It's not good to balloon up and down in weight as you get older in your career. When you talk about a guy that started at 200 plus pounds, brought his body all the way down to 145, it's good for your body when you're cutting weight to do it consistently, to keep it on a good schedule, a good run, where it kind of gets used to, all right, this is when we cut weight, how it's going to feel, whatever. He changed that up. He got to eat more. He got to feel better. He came in and showed a great performance. And do you not think that's going to tempt him to say, why the hell am I cutting back to 145? What am I doing, emaciating myself right now to make this weight class, as opposed to going up to 155 where I just proved I'm very competitive with the best guy in the world? That, for me, is what will ultimately lead Volk to moving up to 155 in a win or a loss in this fight more often than not, right? Why stick around and fight the Ilia Toporias and the other scary guys on the come up when you could move up to 155, stay competitive, eat a little bit more, and lean into some bigger fights and some bigger opportunities in the lightweight division, which is what I think he could have. So that is my ultimate hang up here with Volk. I do think he's going to have motivation. Felt like he should have won his last fight. He's going to come in here wanting to prove a point, wanting to show he's still the best. But I think he's going to be physically just a touch diminished, and I do believe that we've seen Volkanovski rocked on a number of occasions in the UFC, and that's how he's shown his heart and his toughness and his determination. When he was put in bad spots by Brian Ortega, he was able to survive. When he was put in a bad spot by Chad Mendes sat him to his butt. He got right back up, walked him down, and knocked him the hell out. He is a bad man. Make no mistake about any of what I'm saying. But we are also talking about a two-way dance, right? You can't have a fight with one person. And we've got one great fighter on one side and another great fighter, in my humble opinion, on the other. I think Yair Rodriguez has been constantly slept on in the UFC. You got him at dog odds against Brian Ortega. You got him at, a slight favorite tag against Josh Emmett. And frankly, besides that time when he got wobbled with a punch, he looked like he was levels above Josh Emmett, both on the feet and on the ground. So I felt like what we've seen from Yair Rodriguez is a guy who embraces danger, a guy who's willing to go out there and put it all on the line for victory, and a guy who is not quite as technically savvy in all positions, all phases as Volkanovski, but he's dangerous in every single phase of the fight. He's dangerous in the clinch, he's dangerous on the feet, he's dangerous at kicking range, he's dangerous at punching range, and he's dangerous on the ground. Where is it an easy fight? I don't believe it's an easy fight for anybody in the division. I don't think that elite featherweight contests are often going to be lined like this. I think that we oftentimes see it much more competitively lined. We're not seeing that this time. We've got a lot of big favorites on this card. I think somebody has to fall. I think one of these big Aussie favorites is not going to come through. And whether that's Robert Whittaker or it's our guy Volkanovski, I feel like something's got to give here, right? And I feel like both of these guys are elite fighters, so it's hard to pull the trigger against them. But I'm being offered 3-1 on a guy who's got murderous kicks, who's got excellent and improving submission game, who's coming out of Valley Flow Striking Academy in Chicago, which continues to put out championship level fighters in Bilal Muhammad, in Juliana Pena, the aforementioned, right? Not a great look. But anyways, these kind of fighters that are putting on and getting better and better fight over fight. I feel like Yair Rodriguez in that Max Holloway fight showed he's not a plus 600, plus 700, plus 500 type of dog to these fighters. He is a closer, more respected side in these fights, in my view. And I believe that the plus 350 was a great number. I regret that I didn't take it. And frankly, I'm waiting to see how I'm going to approach this fight. But for me, it's clearly a dog or pass situation. I think if you're asking me for a pick with a gun to my head, of course I pick Volkanovski. He's got a great reach for his small stature, right? He's not very tall, but he's got a long reach. He's going to be able to match Yair in terms of his ability to kick the legs, which I think is something Yair doesn't normally have to deal with in many of his opponents, a lot more plotting boxer type of opponents that he's fought in the past. But I feel like in this fight, Volkanovski is going to have one of his hardest matchups that he possibly could at featherweight, and it's not being lined in that manner. So I feel like this is a fight where it's a dog or pass situation for me. James, how do you feel about the number one pound for pound fighter defending his crown against Yair Rodriguez on Saturday night?
thanks for calling him the #1 pound for pound fighter, because I know him and Islam had a little bit of beef over that, and rightly so that Islam didn't get crowned pound for pound #1 because he was moving up in weight. And I know pound for pound's a bit of a stupid discussion, because how can you say, like, if Islam weighed 260 pounds, would he be the like, it doesn't really make sense, right? But Volk was moving up and he did himself justice in that fight. Very close fight. I actually bet on Volk at plus 300 against Islam Makhachev, and I thought that he was in with a shot to win it when we went to the judges' scorecards, but I think I was just letting my, what can I say, my fanboyism get the better of me, because I haven't watched it back but from what I hear, he didn't win the fight. It was 3-2, but it was close, but he didn't win the fight. But with that being said, I kind of agree with your breakdown in the fact that Yair is a little bit wide in this spot. You know, I think Yair, he probably shouldn't be plus 300 against many guys, especially if your name's not Max Holloway, because Max Holloway has the elite chin of all elite chins. And what does Yair Rodriguez do well? He finishes fights. You know, he can finish fight from any position. We've seen that. And one thing about Volkanovski is he has been wobbled multiple times. He got wobbled by Islam Makhachev multiple times in that fight. He's been wobbled by Max Holloway. He's been dropped by Max Holloway a couple of times. He got dropped by Cheb Mendes, quite hard actually. And he also got dropped by Brian Ortega, although that was one where we can leave off the list because he grabbed the leg and just punched him. It was more of an off-balance knockdown than a knockdown. But you know, he has been hurt multiple times in the UFC. He has been rocked a little bit. And so I do think that he may be rocked in this spot. You know, he's got some good people working with him, though. He had Carl Van Room, which is a gym out in Auckland, a Van Room Martial Arts. The guy's a Taekwondo world champion, very, very good kickboxer, very good Taekwondo guy. And he's been emulating Yair Rodriguez. He can do the spins. He can do everything Yair Rodriguez can do. This guy can do as well. So I know that Volk has been putting in the best camp possible to fight Yair. But at the end of the day, and he's also had Blood Diamond training in his corner, who's actually in this chat. So shout out to Blood Diamond. And Blood Diamond has been doing a lot of that Taekwondo stuff as well. But it's a different ball game when you're in there. You know, you can get your training partner to emulate someone, but when you're in there, it's never going to be quite the same, right? So I do think that he might take a round or two to get used to Yair's footwork and range, distance control, and front kicks up the middle. Yair has that weird crescent kick that just hits your face within 2 seconds. And Volkanovski's kind of short for featherweight, so it's going to be even easier for Yair to kick him in the face. I do think Volkanovski has a massive grappling edge in this fight. I think if he takes the fight to the ground, he can ground the pound and bad. We've seen Max Holloway do some damaging things to Yair on the ground. We also saw Frankie Edgar completely dominate Yair back in the day. I know you remember that one where the wrestler just took him down and kind of fraud checked him at that point in his career. I do think that he's got better since then. I do still think there's holes there, and Volkanovski, being the fighter he is, being the level he is, can capitalize on that. So look, I could speak about this fight forever. I really could. But what I'm going to say is that I think there is some value on the plus 300 line. And Liam, I know you said that you missed 350 and you was upset that you missed that. I would say that if you don't like 300 too much and you really wanted that 350, just go for the inside the distance, man. It's 450, because I would have a hard time seeing Yair win by decision. Me personally, there's not enough difference in the plus 300 money line and the plus 450 ITD that I would want to opt for the ITD, because MMA is a crazy game. He might drop him in 2 rounds and just win another one. You know, it is possible he wins a decision, but I think it's very likely that if Yair wins the fight, it is inside the distance. And 450 for the inside the distance is a good number in my opinion. My official prediction is that Volkanovski comes through some early adversity, like he has done in many fights, gets knocked down, but gets back up again, takes the fight to the ground and pound TKO at like maybe round 3 or round 4 when Yair starts to tire. Because Volkanovski not only has one of the best game planning, like we've spoke about the training partners, but one of the best fight IQs and mid-fight adaptations of any fighter in UFC history. Not just UFC right now, but UFC history. A lot of fighters are good at adapting fight to fight, but there's a select few fighters that are good at adapting in the cage, in the fights. And Volkanovski can definitely do that. It's evidence in multiple fights, but specifically the Max Holloway 2 fight. We've seen him do that. And that was just a beautiful fight to watch. If you're an MMA nerd, that's such a great fight. So, yeah, man, I do think that he's going to come through some adversity and get a ground and pound TKO. I like the fight doesn't go to decision. You know what? This is so similar to the Whittaker and DDP fight for me. I think there's value on DDP at plus 300. DDP's, in my opinion, inside the distance or bust, basically. I think there's value on Yair Rodriguez at plus 300, the exact same line. Yair Rodriguez is inside the distance or bust, basically, like Rodriguez, and like DDP. And not only that, I love the ends ITD in both fights at basically the same line. So, yeah, it's just weird how those fights are very similar in my mind. So I've played, again, I'll give out more bets on the stream. I've played the plus 300 Yair Rodriguez, small, but bigger. I've took a bigger position on the ends ITD. I actually got plus 105, but even at minus 120, I think it's a good bet. So those are my picks.
I agree with you almost entirely, James, because I felt like the fight doesn't go to decision was a read for me here. You know, when I look at this fight, I just think to myself, both these guys have a way to finish each other. They bring a lot of violence to the table, and Yair kind of makes you fight a violent-ass fight. And so when Yair's coming out there throwing big kicks and whatever, it's going to be incumbent on Volk to go for takedowns, push him to the ground, or he's going to eat a lot of big shots, you'd have to think, because Yair just can hit him from further away. He's huge, right? He's bigger than Max Holloway, and people are saying Max Holloway never knocked him down. I mean, that's just not true, guys. Like, go back and watch the fights. UFC stats doesn't always get it right. He dropped him with a clean right uppercut in that fight. So I feel like Max Holloway, yeah, exactly. He definitely dropped him more than once. But I know for sure, like, one I can visualize and remember is that uppercut. So, like, you got to always watch the fights, too. UFC stats don't always get it right. But I do think what we know about both these guys is they have dangerous finishing capabilities. And when we're talking about a fight that's only being slightly priced to not go to decision, and you got somebody as dangerous as Yair, who was almost finished in his last fight, but also almost finished his opponent like 50 times, like, it just does scream to me a very violent fight and very slight chalk at this point to pay to find out. So that's an interesting look for me. Jewish Better, how do you feel about this one, my brother? Main event, great fight for International Fight Week. Tell us what you got.
I think another similarity, too, between the Du Plessis and Yair is both guys are super unpredictable, hard to prepare for type guys. Like you said, Volkanovski is very good at adapting. I see this fight a little bit different. I see this fight starting with Yair throwing some kicks, Volkanovski trying to find his range. About halfway through the round, he's taking kicks. He's going to start to find that jab. I think he's going to snap Yair's head back with that jab. Fight keeps going on. I think Yair's going to start to have more success with the striking. You know, Volkanovski's going to have a tough time keeping up with the kicks. I think, you know, some Volkanovski does well. He might not come up high with the kicks a lot, but he does love that low calf kick, and we've seen that in the Max Holloway fight. Whether it was more successful for Max being a boxing stance, we may not see that here. But once he gets his fight to the ground, that ground and pound is vicious. And I think the big factor and the big difference here is those elbows. If he hits him with an elbow, just slightly cuts him, the blood's going to start to drip into Yair's eyes. And I think that's when the fight's going to start to go downhill for him. He might not be able to get a TKO. He might not be able to submit him. But I think that's the huge advantage here. And I think he's going to come in with that game plan as well. It's not to say that he's not going to strike with him. So Yair is 100% live. So like you said, if you're going to take Yair in the spot, take it inside the distance. Not that he's so much like a power puncher or one of those guys or necessarily he is a crazy finisher. I don't want to say that. But I think the reason he's a crazy finisher is because the techniques are so unorthodox, and it's the ones that you don't see coming that hurt the most. Like that elbow that he hit Chan Sung Jung with. It was just last second Hail Mary. I think, 100% he was losing that fight. Still gets the job done. So when you want to talk about the definition of a live underdog, it's Yair Rodriguez in any situation. So he's clearly a live dog here. I think my path in this fight personally, I think Volkanovski is going to give up the first round. I think Yair is going to start off strong. He may not get rocked. And I may look to live bet Volkanovski here, especially if I start to see him start to use the grappling, right? That's my read on the fight. And now I'm getting maybe a better line. That's my spot there. But I think this could be a fight of the year, guys. I think this could be a fight of this could be maybe one of the greatest fight ever. It's two of those guys where you actually have one of those possibilities here, and especially with the fact that Yair has an amazing durability, great chin, just makes for just such an excellent fight here, and I can't wait for this one, guys. I'm geeked.
I love it. I like where your head's at. But let me make this final case here for Yair Rodriguez because, truthfully, I think the thing that goes most unremarked upon is the fact that every style matchup is different, right? It's very unique. Josh Emmett, smaller guy, stout, has some power, knows how to wrestle. And Yair Rodriguez beat the ever-loving shit out of him for almost every minute of that fight because he was hitting him from way further away. He has longer range tools, and he was beating him up, hitting him with harder shots. And when Emmett hit, he landed. He got off big shots. He did make it count. But it still wasn't enough because Yair was doing too much damage too quickly. By the way, Josh Emmett just went 5 hard fives with Ilia Topuria when his face looked like an alien, and Ilia didn't close the show on him, right? He did take him down late. He did push a great pace over 5 rounds. Josh Emmett showed he could do that, but he was completely gassed against Yair Rodriguez because he got hit to the midsection over and over, and that'll tax your cardio no matter who you are. Doesn't matter how good your cardio is if you get hit with a baseball bat to the ribs over and over, right? And I feel like in this fight, we've seen Max Holloway. When's the last time he went out there with a wrestle-heavy approach? He had to wrestle Yair Rodriguez because he was getting hit with baseball bats to the head, neck, and chest, and he was like, what the hell is happening? He felt like he was under attack, so my man started going out there like he's an NCAA wrestler. This is why I said the contiguous 48 and Hawaii. The Hawaiian man put on the wrestling shoes and the headgear. He wasn't from Alaska. He got the takedowns. But I'm telling you this. Volkanovski is a small guy in stature. He is there to be hit with flying knees. He is there to be hit with open side kicks. He is there to be hit with the low line shots that Yair's going to be throwing. So is this a volatile fight? Yes. Is Volkanovski the better guy and more skilled? Absolutely. But have we seen evidence in the past that this kind of fighter could trouble him? Yes. Max Holloway, tall guy with way less power than Yair, by the way, way less, was able to drop him twice because he hit him at the end of his range when Volk thought he was safe. He's going for low kicks. He's going for a naked shot from the outside, and he gets touched. Volk has great confidence. That's normally a selling point. But he's going to come in here with confidence and bravado. He's not a punk. He's not afraid to get into a striking matchup with Yair. You'd be foolish to think so. But that means he's going to put himself in danger because when you are on the feet with Yair Rodriguez, you are in danger, my friend. Round 1, round 5. Ask Chan Sung Jung, right? Thought he was fighting a great fight there. By the way, I don't think that Yair gets any credit for the fact that he was making a huge comeback there. He was winning exchange after exchange before that finish. But what happened was Chan Sung Jung took a lot of damage. He was known for being the zombie. Come forward, take everything, no problem. And what happened? He did it and did it and did it and then fell over. And the fight was over. And it's the greatest knockout in UFC history, potentially. Because this guy, Yair Rodriguez, stays focused for 25, and he can kill you at any point. He's an assassin. He's a murderer. I feel like Yair Rodriguez, a little bit slept on in this spot, fighting a great fighter, no doubt about it. But I just think that this guy at plus 300 is a very, very dangerous fighter for anybody in the division. So hard number to pass up. No bets for me yet, but looking at the underdog side, we've done it, guys. 2 hours and 45 minutes in the can. 2 elite guests. Plenty of great breakdowns. It will all be timestamped for your viewing enjoyment. I'm not going to sleep tonight. I'm hitting jiu-jitsu at 7 a.m., so F it. We'll have plenty of time to do it, but want to just say huge thank you to the 78 people rocking with us live. It is 4:20 Eastern. Blaze the hell up. If y'all are still rocking with us, God bless you for it. Appreciate everybody that made it this late in the show, and mostly appreciate my 2 great guests that made the time today. My one guy literally got hit in the head at sparring. He's staying up with the boys anyways. Our guy Lucrative sees the message on Twitter, pops in last minute, so just 2 great friends of the show. Couldn't appreciate you guys more. I want to give you guys a chance to let the people know where they could find you. My guy Jewish Better, please let them know, brother.
Just to clarify, it was a shitty lat drop, and the guy hit my head. I don't want people to think I'm getting beat up. No, I'm joking. And I agree with you, man. In the main event, I think Yair Rodriguez is the bet for sure because all the reasons you just said, and I'm surprised you already don't have a bet on him with the way you were talking about it, because that could have convinced me, my man.
I missed the plus 350. That's all, brother. I'm waiting to see if I could get a plus 310, a plus 315, peek back out on the board.
Yeah, I think you're better off doing that, but I can't go against Volk at 145, and I think that may be to your benefit at the end of the day. A lot of people are going to have a tough time pulling that trigger against Volk. I think it's a close fight, though. I think it's a really good fight. Maybe even like a 48-47 or a split. I really think this is going to be something in my gut tells me fight of the year, maybe even fight of the last 5 years. We'll see, though. I'm excited.
Love it, brother. And guys, his information in the description box below. You can easily find him using that information, but always appreciate you, my man. James, Lucrative MMA. Probably more time than you hope to invest in this, but brother, it's always a blast talking fights with you. Thank you so much. Please let the people know where they can find you.
No, brother, we've had a good time, man. You know, I think we both got a lot of strong takes, so that's why it lasted a while. But shout out to everybody in the chat as well, because they've rocked with us for like damn near 3 hours now. I think a few of those people were there from the very first bell. So shout out to you guys, man. We basically went as long as a MMA card. So we had fun though, man. I had fun at least for sure, man. Thanks for having me on. We'll do this again sometime for sure. Anytime you're up, bro, you know, I'll see you post out the back call on Twitter and I'll answer the call, bro. I'm sure we'll be doing this again. Hopefully we make some good money. And yeah, bro, that's all I got to say. Not too much. Everybody knows where to find me, Lucrative MMA. If you don't know, you can check out my YouTube channel. You can check out my website, lucrativemmabetting.com. I give out free betting tips on my website. There's a little tab. You can go there. If not, you can just watch my free content that I do on YouTube all the time, man. So yeah, thanks again, Liam, and shout out to everybody in the chat, because without everybody in the chat, there would be no show. You know, without the viewers, we would not be talking about MMA.
It would just be us three talking.
Yeah, we probably would. We would do it. We would talk together, but it wouldn't be public, you know. So definitely got to shout out the viewers always. And yeah, thanks for having me on, boys.
Absolutely. The pleasure is all mine, guys. It's always a blast talking through these fights with these great guests, with the sharpest chat in the game each and every week. So thank you all for your support. If you guys are looking for more information from any of my guests, it's in the description box below. Also, you can find more about me. My name is Liam. I pick fights on this channel each and every week. You guys can find me on multiple platforms at Liam Picks Fights. That includes on all your major podcast platforms. If y'all could show love, drop a follow on there. Maybe give a couple of 5-star reviews if you feel up to it. I'd really appreciate it, because I do put a lot of time, effort, and energy into this stuff on a weekly basis. So it means a lot when people show love and support. Other than that, guys, I got nothing for you. God bless you all. Enjoy those fights. Cash some tickets. Let's keep the momentum rolling. And no matter what, win, lose, or draw, we'll be back next week to have all the same fun again. So thank you all for the time, and see you next time. Take care, everybody.